Gregor forever remembered what happened in his town one spring day when he was a child. Then, a deadly rain of sharp blades fell from the sky to the earth. It was a real punishment for humanity. 10 years have passed since then. Gregor has grown into an intelligent but somewhat shy young man and has begun working as a broadcast operator. So now he was filming a cheeky monster streamer named Marcus. Today, Marcus had a joint stream with Hannah, a blogger who was simply adored by all the viewers. Even though the world was half destroyed by monsters, that didn't stop some people from making good money. First of all, of course, this concerned monster streamers. People who lost their families to monsters but couldn't fight themselves supported monster streamers and followed them as best they could. Not all monster streamers became popular, though. Marcus, for example, never had a huge following. That's why he paid big money to famous bloggers to appear on his broadcasts, thus helping to increase the number of views. Gregor was frankly annoyed by Marcus's behavior. However, the guy understood perfectly well that the monster streamer was simply trying to increase his rating with his actions. Finally, Marcus announced the start of today's hunt. First of all, he invited the audience to look towards the forest. What Gregor saw, following Marcus's index finger, made his heart pound wildly. Moreover, a terrible ape-like monster whom everyone called Aniwan lay sprawled on the lawn. Marcus explained why he chose the monster of the first star. The thing is that there were no hunters nearby. It is obvious that Gregor was only capable of filming the battles of others, but not of participating in them himself. Although Hannah enjoyed authority among bloggers, she could only smile sweetly, dance, and flirt on camera. Marcus noted that in Korea at the moment, there were only 86 hunters who were capable of taking down a one-star monster on their own. Today, the streamer planned to increase that number. Hearing this, Hannah began to urge the audience to cheer for Marcus as hard as possible. The streamer himself confidently moved forward. Hannah followed him. Gregor was the last to stumble. The boy found it hard to believe that Marcus would be able to destroy Aniwan without the help of another hunter. He tried to stop the streamer, but he only got angrier. Then Gregor reminded Marcus that he had been very drunk yesterday. Hearing this, the streamer became even more angry. He was annoyed that an ordinary operator would allow himself to do such a thing. Gregor realized with despair that he could not convince the streamer. Meanwhile, Hannah, working off her money, tried her best to praise Marcus in front of the audience. Gregor had a bad feeling, but he didn't voice it out loud. Suddenly, Marcus decided to demonstrate his skill called firepower. A flame bomb appeared in his hands. This skill was not given to every person. Gregor, looking at all this, once again thought with regret that he himself had no talent. Marcus, meanwhile, launched a flame bomb at Aniwan. Hannah screamed with joy. The streamer himself was convinced of his victory. He immediately began to boast to the audience about his strength. However, the flame bomb didn't kill the monster, it just angered it. It lunged at Marcus and the blogger from behind. They were very scared. Hannah began to beg the streamer for help, but he could do nothing. Not only that, he pushed the blogger away with all his might and ran forward. Marcus also shouted to Gregor to somehow distract Aniwan. He hoped that the boy would become bait for the monster. The streamer himself, without hesitation, quickly ran away. Gregor was shocked by Marcus's behavior. He could not have imagined that he would be such a coward. However, there was no time to think about it, because Aniwan was already flying at the boy. Meanwhile, Marcus was already getting into his luxury car. He didn't give a damn about the fate of any cameraman. Gregor's entire life flashed before his eyes. He remembered how, as a child, his father always told him that God protected him. Little Gregor then sincerely and unquestionably believed this. Now the boy understood that, no matter what, he must continue to hope for God's help. Suddenly, Aniwan pushed Gregor to the ground. The boy was sure that he was finished. However, gathering all his will into a fist, he still got to his feet. A terrible monster loomed over him. Gregor had a thought that his father had always been wrong and that there really was no God. Suddenly, a notification appeared in front of the boy that a spectator was watching him. After that, a strange power took possession of Gregor, and he struck a well-aimed blow at Aniwan. The guy couldn't understand how he managed to do it. A moment later, he received another notification. This time, it said that God was very surprised. When Gregor read this, he felt a real shock. However, the boy had no time to think about this. The monster attacked him again. At the last moment, Gregor managed to hide behind a tree. The guy understood perfectly well that Aniwan's blow could prove fatal for him. Suddenly, Gregor felt a heaviness on his own shoulders and remembered the backpack that had been hanging on them the whole time. Opening it, the boy saw a huge number of weapons. He remembered how Marcus had finally thrown him the backpack. Whatever the case, Gregor was grateful to the streamer for the weapon. After weighing everything, the boy called out loudly to Aniwan. After that, he threw one of the spears he had received from Marcus at the monster. Then Gregor began to throw more and more. He clearly realized that he could not die until he killed this monster with his own hands. Within seconds, the boy grabbed a shovel, which he also found in Marcus's backpack, and rushed at Aniwan with it. Swinging, he hit the monster on the head with all his might. However, Gregor failed to harm Aniwan. Moreover, he only angered the monster even more. The monster picked up a huge stone from the ground and threw it at the boy. He barely had time to run away. Gregor was in despair. He understood that there was almost no chance of salvation. Despite having no superpowers, the boy tried his best all his life. He trained every day in the gym to survive. At home, the boy studied at night and studied Hunter's strategies. Suddenly, a message appeared in front of Gregor, saying that God was applauding him. The guy assumed that it was probably just some kind of hallucination of his. He didn't have time to think about it. Now, first of all, he should have destroyed Aniwan. Gregor shouted defiantly to the monster to catch up with him. In a few seconds, the boy ran around Aniwan and was behind him. He decided to hit the part of the monster's body below its back. A second later, Gregor struck a well-aimed blow. Aniwan roared in incredible pain. Then the boy pulled a bloody spear from the monster's back and stuck it in its stomach. Aniwan screamed even louder. Gregor had obviously found his weak spot. The next moment, the monster fell to the ground, dead. All this was watched in real time by the stream viewers. Gregor tried to catch his breath. He didn't fully understand what had happened. It all felt more like a dream than reality. A message appeared before Gregor's eyes, stating that God was very pleased with his results. Not only that, he called another god to watch over the boy. Meanwhile, stream viewers were discussing Gregor's victory over Aniwan. Everyone was amazed that an ordinary operator managed to kill such a difficult monster. Because of this, someone even suggested that the guy's victory was a simple fake. However, most viewers still tended to believe that Gregor was no ordinary person. That's why he was able to destroy Aniwan. The guy, not realizing that he was on air the whole time anyway, decided to definitely post his fight with the monster on the internet. After a while, Gregor was surprised to see the comments from the audience. He was shocked that his fight with Aniwan was broadcast. In addition, there were 3 times more viewers than Marcus's streams usually attracted. Suddenly, a message appeared before Gregor's eyes that 3 gods were now watching him. The guy literally began to feel his strength growing on a physical level. And for some reason, he really wanted to talk to the audience. Gregor smiled warmly and waved to the audience. After thinking for a moment, he admitted that Marcus had dumped him. A viewer informed Gregor that the streamer had been detained in Seoul. Apparently, he was now facing prison. The guy was interested in Hannah's fate. He wanted to believe that the blogger was still alive. Without wasting time, Gregor rushed to the place where Aniwan had pushed her. Soon, he saw Hannah's body in front of him. The boy did not know if she was alive or not. Messages appeared before the boy's eyes, saying that the gods were calling on Gregor to stop. Despite this, the guy still went to Hannah. Approaching her closely, Gregor breathed a sigh of relief. The girl was alive. Meanwhile, a rescue team had already arrived. The guy understood perfectly well that it was better to leave further actions to specialists. The rescuers quickly got out of the cars and ran to Gregor. They sincerely congratulated him on his victory over Aniwan. Disappearing, Gregor mumbled something about how he was just lucky. He also asked the rescuers for permission to film their work. They had no objections at all. First of all, the men decided to remove Aniwan's body. Suddenly, it turned out that the monster was still alive. The rescuers prepared to shoot it. Meanwhile, some men ran to provide first aid to Hannah. Gregor decided to explain some specific nuances to new viewers. The thing is, the main goal for the rescue team was to extract the core from Aniwan's body. It was the source of the monster's power. Very soon, rescuers found this core. However, Gregor's attention was drawn to Hannah. Something strange was happening to her. Some kind of energy was shooting out of her eyes and mouth at breakneck speed. The rescuers who were next to the girl were thrown several meters away from her. Later, an unknown energy from Hannah's body transformed her into some kind of monster. Gregor recognized him almost immediately. It was Toxic. This monster had 1 star and was known for controlling deadly poisons. The toxin hides under wounds and poisons anyone who comes near the body, thus increasing the number of its victims. The rescuers also recognized Toxic. However, they couldn't figure out where he came from. The men prepared to retreat. They understood that it was unlikely that they would be able to help the victims of the massacre. Despite all this, surprisingly, the rescuers remained absolutely calm. Gregor wasn't going to just give up. He wanted to save Hannah and one of the rescuers, who had already been infected by Toxic. The guy quickly opened his backpack, which contained many useful things. Gregor immediately noticed the gas bottle. He wasted no time in taking it out of his backpack. Then the guy turned on the gas burner and aimed the flame at Toxic. The rescuers didn't like Gregor's act of self-defense at all. Meanwhile, the guy rushed to one of the rescue vehicles. From it, although with some difficulty, he pulled out a heavy fire extinguisher. First of all, Gregor wanted to neutralize Toxic's poison. That's why he rushed straight at the monster with a fire extinguisher in his hands, blazing amidst the flames. All of this was closely watched by the stream viewers, who were impressed by Gregor's bold behavior. The guy understood perfectly well that he now had a great chance to become famous and show the world his true power. He confidently aimed a stream of foam from the fire extinguisher at Toxic. He explained to the audience that fire is the weakness of this type of monster. It neutralizes the Toxic's main power, poison, and renders them powerless and weak. The fire extinguisher is needed to try to save the victims while the monster is weak. Now Toxic could either run away or use all his strength for a final attack. Gregor realized with horror that the monster had chosen the second option. The Toxic one hovered over poor Hannah's body, preparing to penetrate her. A few seconds later, the blogger stood up and screamed in a frantic voice. She was now a zombie. Hannah walked very quickly towards Gregor. Her eyes were empty. The guy was not confused and prepared to fight back. Swinging, Gregor hit the blogger with a fire extinguisher. She fell to the ground. Then the guy threw the rescuer, who also became a victim of Toxic, onto his shoulders. The spectators at the screens could not take their eyes off Gregor's movements. They followed his every move as if spellbound. Gregor, meanwhile, realized that he needed to escape from the epicenter of events as quickly as possible. Then suddenly, Hannah stood up from behind him. It turns out that Toxic was still alive in her body. In a moment, the monster flew out of the girl's mouth with a whistle. The guy realized that in this way, Toxic simply decided to escape. Gregor and the rescuers immediately helped Hannah, who, surprisingly, turned out to be alive. Toxic simply ran away and left his victims alone. Despite this, Gregor felt some regret that he had not been able to finish off the monster. The guy thanked the audience for watching his broadcast. He also noted that there will be no more streams with Marcus. After that, Gregor said goodbye and ended the broadcast. In an instant, messages appeared before his eyes that another god had begun to watch over him. A few days later, a link to Gregor's new channel appeared. Viewers noticed that it had been uploaded to Marcus's website. This surprised and amused them at the same time. Very soon, Gregor began the broadcast, joyfully greeting the audience. The guy said that he is now near the hospital. The medical examination showed that he is now in perfect order. Journalists also gathered nearby, but Gregor tried to avoid them. For several days now, they had not allowed him to pass, asking about the victory over Aniwan. Now they were following Gregor in the hospital and had even set up camp there. So the guy, without thinking for long, decided to get out of here. When Gregor ran to his house, he was seriously scared. The thing is, his apartment was completely destroyed. The guy realized that most likely it was the work of monsters. Gregor was in despair. Now the monsters had attacked the city. Not only the buildings, but also many ordinary people had suffered. Suddenly, the boy wondered what kind of gods were constantly watching over him. Obviously, he got his power from them. Gregor opened his backpack. He realized that the best way to attract the attention of the gods was to compete with monsters. Once upon a time, Siegfried killed the dragon and became immortal. And Perseus received eternal life by defeating Medusa. Gregor knew many legends about heroes who, thanks to the gods, defeated monsters. However, the boy was interested in his own fate. Suddenly, a young man nearby called out to Gregor. It was an attractive blonde with green eyes. He immediately realized that he was the cameraman who had killed Aniwan. Gregor recognized the young man as a famous streamer named Spencer. The guy was surprised that such a famous person had paid attention to him. Not only that, Spencer was streaming right now. He informed his viewers that he had met Gregor. He then said he would be back after a short commercial break and ended the broadcast. Spencer then turned to Gregor, stating that he was only competing with monsters to get as many views as possible. The guy dryly replied to the blonde that he was very mistaken. Spencer didn't like Gregor's tone, so he began to insult him in every way. Suddenly, the guy shouted to the blonde that the other guy had much fewer viewers than he did. These words angered Spencer even more. He declared that Gregor was only pretending to be cool, but he really wasn't. The guy just reminded the blonde that his stream was ongoing and the commercial breaks weren't very long. He also noted that, unlike Spencer, he was broadcasting for his viewers the entire time. The blonde was seriously scared. Besides, he always pretended to be cheerful, kind, and sociable in front of the audience. Now, Spencer's reputation was ruined as the audience saw his true colors. Gregor's broadcast attracted the gods, and he gained more power. Spencer, meanwhile, tried to somehow justify himself to the audience, saying that there had been a slight misunderstanding. He also decided to single-handedly destroy several monsters to regain the public's love. Spencer ordered Gregor to stay out of the way. He didn't want him to help him fight the monsters. Without wasting any time, the blonde quickly activated his power. Then he ran forward quickly. His cameraman could barely keep up with him. Left alone, Gregor thought it would be a good idea to find the monsters that destroyed his house. Meanwhile, Spencer had already come across a monster, another Aniwan. The blonde was confident in his abilities, so he was even glad when Gregor approached him. Spencer wanted the boy to properly appreciate his skills. Gregor shouted at the young man not to show off, but to turn around. The thing is, the monster attacked Spencer from behind. Aniwan threw a heavy stone at the back of the blonde's head. The blonde screamed loudly in terrible pain and fell to the ground. Gregor thought with regret that Spencer had been ruined by his own audacity. He also realized that the monster that attacked the blonde had most likely destroyed his home. Of course, Gregor wanted revenge for the loss of his home. But first, he had to find some kind of cover to hide from Aniwan's attacks. There was no time to think, so Gregor confidently rushed forward. Meanwhile, Spencer had come to his senses. He was terribly ashamed that he had not shown himself in the best light in front of Gregor. Suddenly, the blonde heard Aniwan's terrible roar coming from the destroyed church. Spencer, without thinking for a second, ran towards her. Opening the church door, the blonde froze in place. What he saw shocked him. The body of the dead Aniwan lay beside the wooden cross. Gregor stood calmly beside him. The boy smiled at Spencer and said that God had helped him defeat the monster. The thing is, Gregor destroyed Aniwan by dropping a heavy wooden cross on him. The boy didn't care about Spencer's surprise right now. He was much more interested in the audience's reaction. Gregor sincerely thanked the audience for their support, said goodbye, and ended the broadcast. Spencer called out to the boy in annoyance. He didn't like the fact that he was being ignored. Besides, he was terribly angry that it was not he who killed Aniwan, but Gregor. He suggested that the boy decide which of the two of them was truly stronger. Without waiting for Gregor's response, Spencer turned on the camera. The guy didn't like this at all. Frankly, the blonde was starting to annoy him a lot. Suddenly, Spencer announced that he would like to invite Gregor to a hunt together, which was to take place next week. The guy agreed to the offer. He knew that this type of hunting was considered the best in Korea. Moreover, the most famous monster streamer, Donatella Star, will be present at this event. Before Gregor's eyes, messages appeared that the fifth god had begun to follow him. The next day, the boy arrived at the danger zone of Gimpo Airport. Here, as in most other parts of the city, devastation reigned. Spencer was already waiting for Gregor at the airport. He ordered the boy to follow him. The blonde led the boy somewhere along a confusing path, telling him all sorts of nonsense along the way. 20 minutes later, Spencer led Gregor to where Donatella Star was waiting for them. She was a beautiful brunette of 35 years old. Gregor looked at the woman skeptically. Something surprised him terribly. The thing is that Donatella was not standing on the ground, but hovering above it. This woman really had a superpower, which made her very different from most monster streamers. Donatella greeted Gregor calmly. There was no arrogance in her tone at all. The guy introduced himself to the woman, noting that he was very pleased to meet her. Donatella said the hunt would last 3 days and 2 nights. This information greatly upset Spencer, as he had hoped the event would last no more than a couple of hours. Gregor, on the other hand, was glad that the hunt would be long. He understood that this was a good chance to show himself at his best. The guy assured the woman that she could rely on him. Donatella and Gregor shook hands. 2 days later, the woman met with him and Spencer in one of the tents at the airport to tell them her plan. Gregor literally couldn't take his eyes off Donatella. He realized almost immediately that the woman was from the army. Donatella reported that the number of buñuelos has increased critically at Gimpo Airport. Spencer suggested that the woman wanted to monopolize the land. Donatella denied it. She stated that the official investigation had just concluded. There were about 100 buñuelos now. However, the Donatella team was trying to find out if there was still any danger in this area. Gregor turned his attention to the cameramen who were working with the woman. They were now filming their meeting. It was obvious that they had a difficult job. Suddenly, the boy remembered how he had worked with Marcus. Back then, he had constantly had to risk his life. For example, Gregor climbed the rocks alone, looking for the buñuelos. He told Donatella that this kind of hunting was very dangerous. The more buñuelos there are, the harder it is to deal with them. In addition, they inflict so-called riots on each other. Gregor suggested forcing the buñuelos to cast rampage on one monster and taking advantage of the opportunity while they were exhausted. Spencer replied that the guy's proposal was some kind of delusion. Oddly enough, Donatella agreed with the blonde. The woman suggested another option. She and Spencer would shoot, and Gregor would act as bait. The guy didn't object. He was interested in taking part in the hunt, even in this status. Donatella had 2 main advantages: incredible looks and hunting abilities. Of course, the broadcast with her, Gregor, and Spencer attracted a huge number of viewers. Gregor was happy that his audience had grown. However, he was not very happy with Donatella's consistent hunting strategy. The guy was convinced that the audience should be surprised every time. In addition, although it was clear how to destroy the buñuelos, there were 2 other major problems. Firstly, these are the buñuel buffs. The monster could inflict rampage on another, but not on itself. Secondly, due to a recent territorial clash with another herd, the buñuelos were now constantly on guard. After weighing everything carefully, Gregor began his own broadcast. The guy invited the audience to watch how he would hunt the buñuelos. After that, Gregor immediately rushed forward bravely. He also noted that there was no need to worry about Donatella and Spencer. They were experienced hunters who easily defeated monsters. But Gregor had never been on this kind of hunt. Meanwhile, one of the Buinuls had increased endurance, intelligence, physical strength, frost resistance, and resistance to gravity. It also has improved fire resistance and electrical resistance. On top of everything else, the monster has grown considerably in size. Gregor asked the audience to guess why he had brought the door with him. Whoever could guess would receive a gift. A variety of answer options immediately poured into the chat. The viewer with the nickname Princess in the Polka Dots won, offering a camouflage version. Gregor promised to send the winner a buffalo horn and explained why he had taken the door as camouflage. The thing is, the monsters applied buffs to one Buinul while they themselves were resting behind him. Anatomically, these creatures were designed to always look down at the ground. Because of this, they developed astigmatism. If Gregor covers his body and approaches them from the front, they will mistake him for part of the landscape. The guy was convinced that he could handle the Buinuls. He prepared to attack. Gregor hit one monster with an iron door with all his might on the head. However, this did not kill the monster. On the contrary, it seems that the boy's blow only disarmed the monster. Without thinking twice, Gregor hit Buinul again. He understood that only such direct attacks and the hunter's superpowers could destroy the monster's core. And indeed, on the second attempt, Gregor managed to achieve his goal. However, the boy destroyed only one Buinul, and there were dozens more around. Gregor had to quickly come up with some new strategy. Suddenly, a notification appeared before his eyes that one of the gods had decided to throw him a gift. At that very moment, something lit up on the head of the murdered Buinul. Gregor cautiously approached the body of the destroyed monster. Bending down, he saw a shovel. The boy was terribly surprised, realizing that this was a gift from God. Besides, the shovel turned out to be incredibly heavy for some reason. The boy realized that something was wrong with this object. Obviously, the shovel was unusual. With great effort, Gregor lifted it above his head. However, the shovel did not turn into a sword. The guy wished he was in a video game right now. It turns out he would have to kill the Buinulus with this very shovel. He had no other choice. It's also worth noting that Donatella and Spencer were already quite tired, and reinforcements still hadn't arrived. Exhaling, Gregor rushed at the Buinuls with the door in one hand and the shovel in the other. Not even a minute passed before the boy managed to knock the core out of one of the monsters. Only now did Gregor notice that the shovel was actually very sharp. A message appeared before his eyes that 6 gods were now watching him. The boy decided to hurry up. He didn't want to spend the whole day fighting the Buinuls. Very soon, Gregor destroyed an entire herd of monsters. He did this thanks to his sharp blade. The guy was very happy that he was able to help Donatella and Spencer. Moreover, powerful help was already rushing to them. Suddenly, Gregor heard a strange sound. He quickly turned around. What he saw made him seriously scared. Sharp blades were cutting the aid workers in half. A moment later, the boy saw a giant, scary monster. Gregor could never forget one day. Then, as a little 9-year-old boy, he returned home after school. His mother, Marisabel, was making delicious fish cakes for dinner. Gregor's younger sister, Lulu, ran out to him and boasted about the elegant dress her father had bought her. Later, the children's father, Richard, appeared. He asked Lulu not to be naughty. Exactly 10 minutes later, the entire family had to escape from the sharp blades raining down on them from the sky. On this day, Gregor lost his younger sister, mother, and father. For the rest of his life, the boy remembered the monster that took his family and wiped out an entire city. Now the monster was in front of him again. Gregor gritted his teeth in fear. This monster was known as Zeroblade. It had a 5-star rating. None of the viewers of the broadcast believed in Gregor's victory. Everyone was convinced that the monster would destroy the guy. Gregor himself, instead of starting to panic, laughed out loud. The thing is, he had been waiting for this moment his whole life. He rushed at Zeroblade with a shovel. The monster fought back and immediately attacked in return. However, he failed. Gregor managed to dodge. Then it was the boy's turn to attack again. He desperately threw himself at the Zeroblade. Above all, he sought revenge for the death of his relatives. Suddenly, one of the monster's blades grazed Gregor's shoulder. Fortunately, it was a minor injury. It didn't stop the boy. Zeroblade not only had a human appearance, but could also think and learn. Gregor had designed an incredible number of simulations of it. Now he planned to use everything he had learned. The boy hoped that Zeroblade would die at his hands. The reaction of the gods to everything was contradictory. Some believed in Gregor's victory, some did not. The monster pushed the boy away. The boy dropped his camera. The gadget fell to the ground and broke. But Gregor had no time to regret it. He only wanted one thing: the death of Zeroblade. Swinging out, he angrily struck the monster with all his might. The camera, which had previously fallen to the ground, although damaged, did not turn off. The broadcast continued. The audience was amazed that Gregor was so brave in competing with a 5-star monster. Suddenly, the unexpected happened. Zeroblade began to run away from the boy. The audience was amazed. Someone even suspected Gregor of staging a fake performance. The boy himself tried to stop the monster. He wanted it to die, not escape. It's unclear where Spencer came from. The blonde started shouting that he would kill Zeroblade alone. Gregor was very unhappy with the young man's behavior. He tried to stop Spencer, but the blonde, who obviously considered himself the Korean Thor, didn't listen to the boy. Spencer began to launch his lightning bolts at Zeroblade. The blonde's monster attacks did no harm. On the contrary, since he now had 2 opponents, he increased the number of his own blades. Gregor was in despair, because now there was no guarantee that he would be able to defeat Zeroblade. In the end, the boy decided to simply dodge the monster's attacks. However, not even a minute passed before the Zeroblade simply disappeared. Spencer decided that he had ruined everything. He was even a little ashamed in front of Gregor. The blonde tried to offer the guy compensation, but he wouldn't hear of it. Gregor hit Spencer in the face with all his strength. The young man couldn't stand on his feet and fell to the ground. Gregor's rage seemed to know no bounds. At that moment, he hated the blonde with all his heart. And meanwhile, 11 gods were already watching the boy. The next day, Gregor woke up in the hospital. The first person he remembered was Zeroblade. Obviously, this monster wasn't as strong as the boy had thought all his life. Gregor believed he could destroy the monster with the help of a sharp shovel that one of the gods had given him. Suddenly, the boy noticed that the crows were screaming very loudly outside the window. This surprised him. After a moment, Gregor realized that it was not the cry of ordinary birds, but of Okarkul. There were 2 types of monsters in the world: dangerous and almost completely innocent. The latter were of little interest to people. That's exactly what Okarkul was. He was a monster forecaster who could read the fate of the area. Screaming with the left head predicted trouble. Screaming with the right head predicted well-being. Now, fortunately, the right head screamed. The guy breathed a sigh of relief. It turns out that everything wasn't so hopeless. Suddenly, he remembered his equipment. He wondered what had happened to it. Looking into the nightstand next to the bed, Gregor saw his gadgets. The guy decided to see what happened while he was being diagnosed in the hospital. It turns out that Zeroblade fled south. However, he still remained a monster that humanity simply could not defeat. Without the help of the gods, Gregor would surely have died in yesterday's battle with that monster. In addition, the situation became significantly more complicated when Spencer entered the battle. However, despite everything, Gregor was glad that he managed to survive after a collision with such a strong monster. The boy thought about his shovel. He wondered where it was now. Messages appeared before Gregor's eyes, saying that the gods were laughing at him. The guy decided to get a little distracted, so he started broadcasting. Gregor greeted the audience. Seeing that the boy was currently in the hospital, they immediately began donating money to him. For this, Gregor decided to answer the audience's questions. First, he admitted that he does not have any superpowers. Secondly, he honestly told the audience about his past, namely how Zeroblade killed his family. The guy also urged others to never lose hope. However, Gregor did not mention the gods who were watching over him and helping him. Suddenly, an unfamiliar man entered the boy's hospital room. It was a handsome doctor named Daniel. He smiled warmly at Gregor. The man immediately noted that the guy was no ordinary person. The doctor also said that they are currently in a special hospital for monster diseases. He went on to say that many people want to perform an autopsy on Gregor. Hearing this, the boy was, of course, quite frightened. Despite Gregor's reaction, Daniel continued talking. It turns out that while the boy was asleep, several tests were performed on him. The results showed that Gregor was a normal guy. However, the people in the government don't really believe it. On top of everything else, the doctor said he sent Gregor's shovel to the lab because the government wanted it. The boy was confused. Now he had no idea how to proceed. After waiting for a pause, Daniel announced that he and his colleagues had found something unusual. After these words, he threw a strange, round object into Gregor's hands. It was nothing more than a recycled monster core. The core could be called the foundation of the monster. People who could resonate with it and absorb its energy were called superhumans. Gregor had already taken a similar test as a child. The results showed that he was completely normal. Each superhuman has a monster core that is suitable for them. That is, they could only use the power of one type of core. If the type of core did not fit, then the Superman could not use his abilities. Everyone knows which core suits them. However, none of the known types of cores suited Gregor. That is, it was the core of a monster that had never been killed before. Everything the doctor said interested the boy little. The thing is, superpowers were just one way to destroy the Zeroblade. Now Gregor wanted above all to be discharged from the hospital. The doctor did not object. However, he strongly recommended that the boy return for a repeat diagnosis in a month. Gregor didn't answer. He was already walking towards the exit from the hospital ward. Then suddenly he saw his shovel next to the bedside table. A second ago it wasn't there. Gregor's surprise knew no bounds. The boy's reaction made the doctor laugh. A message appeared before Gregor's eyes, stating that 12 gods were now watching him. The guy promised the doctor he would come back in a month, then took a shovel and left the ward. The next day, Gregor left for the Korean branch of the Monster Suppression Association. Previously, when the guy worked with Maris, he often came here. Usually, after battles, there is loot left that can be processed and used in everyday life. For example, bones and skin, which can be used to make equipment for hunters. Monster meat was often used in the production of food. In addition, you could make good money from killing monsters. Today, Gregor came to the Monster Suppression Association to collect his reward. The secretary immediately recognized the guy as the operator who had destroyed Aniwan. Her surprised cry brought other employees of the Monster Suppression Association running. Gregor did not like this attention to himself at all. The secretary felt uncomfortable in front of the guy, so, smiling sweetly, she asked him how she could help him. Gregor mentioned that he would like to receive a reward for the monsters he killed on a recent hunt. While the secretary was deducing the boy's fate, one of the employees of the Monster Suppression Association called out to him. A second later, another young man approached them. Gregor was starting to get really irritated. He now felt like an exotic animal in a zoo. Realizing that he had no other choice, the guy turned on the camera. The employees of the Monster Fighting Association began to demand that Gregor stop filming them. Sighing, the boy turned away from them and began broadcasting. He explained to the audience that he was now waiting for his reward for the battle with the Buinuls and Zeroblade. 10 minutes later, the secretary finally revealed Gregor's fate. It is worth noting that this was a much lower amount than the guy had expected. Without thinking twice, Gregor told the audience that the Monster Suppression Association had robbed him. He also suspected that they wanted to take away his shovel. A few minutes later, the assistant manager ran up to Gregor. He explained that most of the proceeds were sent to the families of the hunters who died that day. The assistant manager emphasized that the Monster Fighting Association did not engage in any corrupt activities. However, Gregor was not satisfied with the man's words because internal funds were responsible for compensating the families of the deceased. The assistant manager was in despair. He knew perfectly well that his career was now under great threat. Meanwhile, Gregor and the audience waited for an explanation from the man. Suddenly, a rough male voice called out to the boy. Gregor turned around displeased. Before him stood a hunter named Brutus. He sternly asked the boy what he had done here. Gregor realized that he now had two sources of headache. Brutus was not a streamer, but a pure hunter with fairly average skills. Despite this, he had something special. This man belonged to the generation that had witnessed the first invasion of monsters. Brutus was one of those who had experienced a far greater horror than that which now prevailed. He led a new generation of hunters to ensure that the past would not be repeated. At this point, Brutus was the spiritual leader of the hunters. The man began to accuse Gregor of being selfish. This made the boy laugh a lot. Brutus was even more outraged by the boy's reaction. Gregor noted that no one stood up for him when his family died. Not only that, the government dropped a missile on the place where he lived. Because of her, Gregor even lost his roof over his head. The government missile didn't even leave a scratch on Zero Laws. So now Gregor advised Brutus to get rid of him. The man understood the boy's pain, but he was not going to back down. Then Gregor confessed to Brutus that he was not a hunter, but an ordinary man. These words terribly surprised the man. Gregor turned to the assistant manager, saying that as a reward, he was only going to take a shovel and one of Buinul's horns. An employee of the Monster Suppression Association was shocked to see the shovel. This object was now called Hutcherson. It was named after a famous warrior from the past. At this point, that shovel should have been in the lab, not Gregor's. Suddenly, someone called the assistant manager. It was none other than the manager himself. The man couldn't help but respond. However, before that, he asked Gregor to wait a bit. The guy, of course, did not listen to the assistant manager and headed for the exit. A minute later, the man caught up with the guy, assuring him that the manager himself wanted to meet with him. Gregor had neither the time nor the desire for that. He wanted to leave the Monster Slayer Association as soon as possible. Suddenly, the boy heard someone call his name. Turning around, he saw some evil big guy who was dressed all in black. It took Gregor a few seconds to recognize him. It was Marcus. The guy smiled, realizing that the streamer could make his broadcast even more interesting. 20 minutes later, the young people were standing opposite each other in the fresh air. Marcus still couldn't believe that his former operator had managed to scare off the Zeroblade. As Gregor expected, the views increased significantly with the streamer's appearance in the frame. The guy couldn't help but be happy about this. Suddenly, Marcus started shouting that Gregor had become so popular only because of him. The boy couldn't stand it. He resolutely moved towards the streamer. Marcus was terribly scared and rushed away from the boy. Gregor was not far behind. He wanted the streamer to compete with him. Marcus remembered how the court had issued him a huge fine for abandoning the boy and Hannah to their fate. And now he was being forced to marry some girl he didn't even know. Meanwhile, Gregor finally caught up with the streamer. He suggested that they compete like real men. They had to fight with their fists. Gregor was forbidden to use a shovel, and Marcus was forbidden to use his superpowers. The guy's physical capabilities were enhanced, so he believed he could deal with the streamer without a weapon. Marius didn't like this offer very much. He couldn't imagine how one could fight without using a core. After thinking for a moment, Gregor allowed the streamer to activate this artifact. A second later, a burning bomb appeared in Marcus's hands. He planned to use it to kill his former cameraman. Without hesitation, Marcus aimed the bomb at the boy. However, Gregor managed to slip between two streams of fire. Marcus was shocked. He didn't expect this from an ordinary person. A few seconds later, the streamer had another plan for how to finish off Gregor. He simply used another fire technique, which he mastered perfectly. But instead of dying, Gregor attacked Marcus himself. He had worked for this scumbag for 3 years, so he knew Marcus's style very well. Gregor punched the streamer hard in the face. He couldn't stand on his feet, and in front of a large crowd of spectators, fell to the ground. Marcus looked so pathetic now. It was hard to believe that he had once had millions of fans. Gregor, meanwhile, promised to send the promised prize to Princess in the Polka Dot tomorrow. Suddenly, little Okarkal sat on the boy's shoulder. He began to predict Gregor's luck, which greatly amused the audience. The assistant manager was watching the boy closely from behind a tree at that moment. He couldn't believe that Gregor had managed to defeat Marcus. The man decided to definitely detain the boy. A minute later, bowing low, he came out to Gregor. The assistant manager started to mumble something about the Monster Suppression Association, offering the boy its sincere apologies. He also offered Gregor a place to stay. However, the boy replied that he earned enough to find a place to stay. Okarkal also reacted poorly to the offer of a house. The boy took a step forward to get away from the Monster Suppression Association as quickly as possible. Suddenly, a flock of some birds of prey appeared in the sky. Looking more closely, Gregor recognized them as pigwing monsters. All the people on the street quickly rushed to shelter. However, many of them did not make it. The doors to the premises were literally closed in front of their noses. This made Gregor terribly angry. Moreover, so many years had passed, and the government's attitude towards ordinary people had not changed. Suddenly, the boy heard a scream. It was a girl begging for help. The monstrous pigwing loomed over her, preparing to sink its claws into the poor girl's body. Gregor immediately rushed to help. He stuck the shovel into Pigwing's paw. The monster flew away. The boy ordered the girl to quickly run into the forest. Gregor himself joyfully informed the audience that the second part of the broadcast had begun. A 13th god joined the viewing. The boy, boldly brandishing his shovel, rushed into battle with the pigwings. True, he understood that it would be extremely difficult for him to cope with so many monsters. Each monster here was the size of an elephant. It was obvious that killing them one by one would not work. So they had to find one weak spot in all these pigwings. He knew that monsters of this type eat scum and can smell even from great heights. After thinking for a while, Gregor decided to cut off one paw from each pigwing. With the help of a sharp shovel, he did this extremely easily. The thing is, the heavy bodies of the pigwings were kept balanced by these paws. Now the monsters were starting to lose their balance. It would take time for pigwings to recover, and that was in Gregor's favor. The guy began to chop off the monster's paws even more actively. The audience was simply delighted with such a spectacle. Suddenly, Okarkal again began to warn Gregor about some threat. And indeed, one of the pigwings almost tore the boy apart. It was a good thing he had managed to break in time. Gregor again heard someone's cries for help. They belonged to Marcus. It turns out he didn't run away, but instead tried to fight off the monsters as best he could. Gregor was surprised to see so many pigwings circling the streamer, although maybe they just liked the smell of it. Marcus began to beg Gregor for help. The boy had an idea. He picked up a handful of stones from the ground and threw them at the pigwings. This caused the monsters to fly away from Marcus. The streamer couldn't believe that his former cameraman had saved him. Without waiting a second, Marcus ran for cover. However, no one was going to let him in. Meanwhile, pigwings caught up with the streamer again. Gregor sighed. He didn't want to save Marcus again, but he had no choice. The Monster Fighting Association structure held up. However, it was only a matter of time before the pigwings broke through. Gregor promised the audience that he would help those who couldn't reach shelter get inside. Meanwhile, Marcus was starting to get hysterical. He didn't want to die at the claws of the pigwings. Streamer decided to take advantage of the general chaos and still run to cover. But not even a few seconds passed before one of the monsters picked up Marcus and lifted him into the sky. The man literally began to cry for help. Gregor advised Marcus to calm down and prepare for landing. After that, the boy cut off Pigwing's paw that was holding the streamer. He fell to the ground. And Pigwing, whose paw Gregor had torn off, flew after the boy. He didn't panic. On the contrary, Gregor realized that a good chance had appeared. At this moment, the people who had not made it to the shelter were banging on the iron door with all their might. Gregor shouted to them to disperse as quickly as possible. A moment later, Pigwing, who had been chasing the boy, broke through the wall of the structure. Gregor ordered the people to run to the middle. The boy recommended that the hunters from the Monster Suppression Association fight. They could still win. They realized that Gregor was right and joined the fight. The guy noted that the hunters from the Monster Suppression Association were doing quite well. However, they lacked firepower. Meanwhile, one of the Pigwings almost grabbed a woman with a child. But Gregor again managed to come to the rescue in time. The audience was moved by the boy's action. Zeroblade grew stronger the more enemies he was surrounded by. He had to be fought one-on-one. Gregor needed a strong base so that no one could get between him and Zeroblade. He understood that the people who watched him would increase society's faith in him. They will become Gregor's powerful force. Now the boy was in hiding with other ordinary people. Everyone was very grateful to him for saving them. Suddenly, Okarkal warned the boy about the renewed danger. And indeed, not even a minute had passed before a giant pigwing flew into the room. He wounded Gregor with his claws, but the boy did not panic. He grabbed a shovel and prepared to attack the monster. Unfortunately, Greywing managed to dodge in time. This surprised Gregor quite a bit. It was obvious that this monster was different from the members of its pack. He must have been the leader of the Pigwings. The monster lunged at the boy. Gregor tried his best to hold back the monster's attack with the shovel. It was extremely difficult for him. In the end, the boy still managed to land a well-aimed blow to Greywing's head. The monster roared in incredible pain. A second later, he rushed away from cover. Gregor, grabbing Greywing's fang, flew away with him. However, the boy could not hold on and fell to the bottom. Everyone was convinced that Gregor had crashed to his death. But a real miracle happened. The boy survived. True, now it was extremely difficult for him to keep his balance. Later, the leader of the Pigwings flew up to the boy again. Gregor tried his best to dodge the monster's claws. But unfortunately, his body wouldn't listen to him. At one point, the boy even thought he was going to die. Suddenly, a familiar female voice called out to Gregor. It belonged to Donatelli. It is unclear how the woman ended up on top of Pigwing's head. She arrived to help the boy deal with the monster. Gregor was happy to see Donatella. Not only that, he felt a new surge of energy. The woman, meanwhile, activated her power and directed it against the monster. Pigwing roared in terrible pain and rage. Gregor, not letting the monster regain consciousness, quickly hacked it with a sharp shovel. The monster was finished. Donatella praised the guy for his agility, noting that now they are even. Gregor was very pleased to hear such words from a famous streamer. Suddenly, messages appeared before his eyes that the gods were not very interested in observing the relationships of young people. Later, in the basement of the Monster Suppression Association, Donatella confessed to Gregor that she had not known about his hospitalization. The guy assured the woman that everything was fine with him now. As it turned out, Donatella's younger brother was a fan of Gregor's streams. He didn't even watch her broadcast. The guy was very surprised that the woman's brother was signed to him. A minute later, Donatella said goodbye to Gregor and flew off on her own business. The guy looked at her. This woman gave him strange but very pleasant feelings. Suddenly, a large number of shelves caught his attention. Rumors that the Monster Suppression Association keeps secret documents in its basements turned out to be true. Gregor realized that it was time to get out of here. After 20 minutes, he said goodbye to the audience and ended the broadcast. When Gregor was outside, a hunter named Colin approached him. He wanted to buy a shovel from the boy. The hunter was ready to pay any money for this item. A message appeared before Gregor's eyes stating that he had received a gift from one of the gods. The boy was terribly curious about what he had received this time. However, he had not seen anything yet. Meanwhile, Kevin continued to persuade Gregor to sell him the shovel. Of course, Gregor did not agree. Moreover, the guy promised to turn on the camera if the hunter didn't let go of him. Suddenly, another young man named Christian approached them. He thought Kevin wanted to steal Gregor's things. Christian's attention was also drawn to the boy's shovel. Gregor realized that these two men were unlikely to just let him go. Sighing, he prepared to wriggle out of the situation. The boy quickly stuck the shovel into the ground. Suddenly, he noticed a handle with a ring on it, which was not there before. Gregor realized that this was obviously a gift from God. Meanwhile, even more people laid eyes on the boy's shovel. Gregor promised that he would give the object to the one who could retrieve it from the ground with his bare hands, without using any superpowers. Those who cannot do this will have to get on their knees and beg for mercy. Everyone immediately agreed to this offer. It seemed like a breeze to get the shovel out of the ground. Gregor turned on the camera and got ready to shoot. The action promised to be interesting. None of the hunters wanted to be on the guy's broadcast, as it could damage their reputation. But that was another condition of Gregor's. Everyone had to agree to it. Kevin decided to try to pull out the shovel first, but no matter how hard he tried, he got absolutely nothing out of it. The shovel in the man's hands didn't even move. The next to try his luck was the stocky Christian. However, he couldn't pull the shovel out of the ground either. It seemed to have grown into it. After the object failed to catch any of the hunters, everyone decided that Gregor was tricking them. Then the boy demonstratively pulled the shovel out of the ground by himself. He had just done this when a terrible earthquake began. Gregor was confused. He didn't understand what was happening. Everyone knew that Korea was not threatened by earthquakes. The guy thought that his shovel had caused the cataclysm, especially since the ground split exactly where the object was inserted. Fortunately, the earthquake ended quickly, and there was no serious damage. It was obvious that the whole thing was about the ring. However, Gregor still did not understand how it worked. The hunters were amazed. Each time, the former cameraman surprised them more and more. Gregor, meanwhile, quickly said goodbye to the audience and ended the broadcast. The place near the Monster Suppression Association building seemed cursed to him, so he wanted to get out of there as soon as possible. That same night, the guy visited a 24-hour convenience store. There he bought his favorite spicy ramen, which he had been dreaming about for several days in a row. Then Gregor sat down at one of the tables next to the shop and tried to relax. He succeeded. Less than 20 minutes later, the boy felt himself recovering. He wondered why he had become the one the gods were interested in. Gregor had no answer to this question. The boy started eating ramen. Eating his favorite food always improved his mood. The guy didn't even notice that a man sitting at the next table had noticed him. Before that, the stranger had just watched the news on his tablet, which reported that monster attacks had become more frequent. During the day, dozens of pigwings attacked the Monster Suppression Association's hideout. The hunter who put the most effort into winning was Gregor, the former cameraman of the popular streamer Marcus. Although the boy has no superpowers, he has shown himself to be an incredibly strong and agile hunter. In addition, Gregor has a powerful weapon in the form of a shovel. Suddenly, a new notification appeared before the boy's eyes. In it, the gods advised Gregor to get away from the store as soon as possible. The guy was indignant. What's more, they didn't even let him eat properly. And now the 14th god began to watch over him. Sighing, Gregor finally got up from the table, never finishing his ramen. He felt that exciting adventures awaited him in the future. The next day, Gregor went to one of the wealthiest areas of the city. He knew that his viewer nicknamed Princess in the Pea lived somewhere here. Suddenly, someone called out loudly to the boy. Turning around, Gregor saw the guards. The men didn't like the boy walking around here. They aimed a laser beam at him. Gregor took out a shovel just in case. Then the guards started shooting the boy with electric shocks. Gregor's body was literally twisted in pain. He couldn't even move. At some point, the guards recognized the guy as a celebrity. They immediately began apologizing for their behavior. Gregor decided not to make a fuss, so he assured the men that everything was fine with him. One of the guards named Drake turned out to be a big fan of the guy. Gregor asked permission to enter one apartment complex. After that, he took out the horn of Buinal. Upon seeing it, Drake was speechless for a few seconds. Besides, it was a prize for the winner of the stream. The guard was also impressed that Gregor had brought it personally. After thinking for a moment, Drake allowed the boy to enter the apartment complex. A few minutes later, Gregor was already going up in the elevator. Coming out on the 8th floor, the boy thought that the building he was in now looked more like a palace than an apartment building. Soon Gregor found the right apartment at number 801. Exhaling, the boy quickly pressed the bell. Then he placed Buinal's horn on the floor near the door and rushed away as fast as he could. Hiding behind a wall, Gregor carefully watched what would happen next. A beautiful brown-haired girl with brown eyes emerged from apartment number 801. A lovely blush played on the girl's cheeks. Seeing Buinal's horn, the brown-haired woman was very happy. Gregor thought that the nickname Princess in the polka dots suited this girl extremely well. The guy liked the brown-haired girl at first sight. Suddenly, Okarkul, who had been sitting on Gregor's shoulder the whole time, let out a loud cry. Hearing a crow cawing in the corridor of a high-rise building, Princess P was quite surprised. She began to look around. Gregor tried to close Okarkul's beak, but it was too late. The girl slowly walked down the corridor towards the boy. The boy quickly ran to the emergency exit. A moment later, he was already racing down the stairs. On the street, Gregor asked Drake not to tell anyone that he had been here. Far from the apartment complex, the boy fell helplessly onto the asphalt. Suddenly, someone called out to him. Standing up, Gregor saw Donatella in front of him. As it turned out, the woman lived in the area. She was curious about what the guy was doing here. Gregor replied that he had come to give the prize to a spectator. Donatella sighed. She got the impression that the guy didn't give a damn about his life. She advised Gregor to be more careful. Moving away from Donatella, the boy turned his attention to Okarkul. The boy realized that he was obviously hungry. Gregor reached into his pocket for his sandwich. Suddenly, he realized that he had lost the monster's core. The boy realized that Okarkul could easily swallow him. At that moment, the monster flew off the boy's shoulder and flew away. The boy rushed after him. He understood that he must definitely return the valuable core. Princess in the polka dots was watching Gregor's actions carefully through the window. A few days later, a pack of pigwings attacked the city again, causing considerable fear among the civilians. However, Gregor managed to deal with the monsters this time too. The guy's fans were once again convinced of his courage, strength, and agility. Interestingly, Okarkul now performed the functions of Gregor's operator. The boy had no time to recover when another flock of disgusting pigwings attacked him. Laughing, Gregor raised his shovel to the mountain and announced the beginning of the monster stream. A respectable gray-haired gentleman with glasses was watching the guy's broadcast. He really didn't like the fact that such a strong hunter wasn't a member of the Monster Suppression Association. After thinking for a moment, he ordered his assistant to reward Gregor for saving the city from the pigwings. It was a cunning plan to take the boy's shovel away. This conversation took place in residence number 44 in Huntingtown. And in Seoul, on the defense line of Sector A, the passage of Detachment C was allowed. It consisted entirely of young, strong men. Their leader was a dashing young man named Jonathan. Squad C was terribly annoying to the guards, but they tried to keep themselves in check. Suddenly, in the distance, everyone saw a large cloud of dust of unknown origin. At the same time, Gregor was walking down the street in Seoul. The atmosphere in the city was unsettling. The thing is, Seoul was attacked by explosives. Because of this, the danger level was raised. Exactly 24 hours ago, Gregor was sitting in the reception room of the Monster Suppression Association. There, an employee named Henry informed the boy that they wanted to give him a house. This building is located in the new hunting town of Gangnam. Gregor felt that he was being tricked. That was why the boy was attentive to details. He had now arrived in Gangnam to look at the house that was being offered to him as a gift. Suddenly, a familiar, unpleasant voice called out to Gregor. Turning around, the boy saw Spencer. The blonde was streaming. The man hinted to the audience that he and Gregor were now friends. The guy barely restrained himself from giving Spencer a hard slap. The blonde said that he knew that Gregor would most likely move to Gangnam. It turns out that Spencer was told this by his younger sister Connie, who was always aware of all the rumors. The girl greeted Gregor awkwardly. She was extremely ashamed of her brother's behavior. The guy liked Spencer's younger sister. The blonde man remarked that he could tell Gregor the way to the house. After thinking for a moment, the boy agreed. A minute later, they were walking together down Gangnam Street. Suddenly, a stern voice ordered them to stop immediately. Spencer advised Gregor to quickly turn off the camera. Jonathan stood before the young people along with other members of the S detachment. As it turned out, they didn't like the fact that Spencer was still streaming instead of joining the stormtroopers. The blonde replied that he had some business with Gregor at the moment. Jonathan asked the boy to show him his hunter card. Gregor had no intention of doing this. Moreover, the young man's demand angered him. Then Jonathan took out his dagger and put it to the boy's neck. Gregor was not frightened, but he was wary. It was obvious that anything could be expected of this young man. Jonathan began calling the boy a clown, a scarecrow, and a stupid guy. The guy was not at a loss and suggested that the young man check which of them was really capable of what. Jonathan didn't object. In his mind, he had already slit the boy's throat. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a female police officer appeared. She ordered the young people to disperse immediately. Spencer asked Gregor to get out of here as soon as possible. He knew that Jonathan was a thug who was best left alone. An hour later, Gregor, Spencer, and Connie finally arrived at the house. The guy thanked the blonde for her help and said that from now on, he would handle it himself. Spencer and Connie said goodbye to Gregor and, although reluctantly, left. The guy wanted to know from Okarkal what he thought about the house. The monster croaked loudly, predicting trouble for Gregor. The guy wasn't surprised. He felt that the house they wanted to give him was not easy. Gathering his thoughts, Gregor cautiously entered the building. He held a shovel tightly in his hands. The guy was ready to attack at any moment. However, there was no one in any of the rooms in the house. Calming down, the boy lay down on the soft bed. He asked Okarkal not to scare him unnecessarily anymore. However, the monster began to croak again. This time, even louder. Unable to bear to listen to this, Gregor decided to take a walk. He got out of bed and headed for the door. Okarkal didn't want to let him go. The monster's behavior really surprised the boy. The boy had just left the building when the alarm went off. The monsters broke through the city's defense line, so all hunters were ordered to prepare for battle. The guy realized that we were talking about dangerous explosive Taurians. Suddenly, there was an explosion, and the house Gregor was standing next to collapsed. Several hours passed before rescuers found the boy under the rubble. Fortunately, he was alive. He was told to evacuate as soon as possible. Sitting on the ruins of what had once been a house, Gregor thought about his recent bad luck. A minute later, a monster appeared in front of him, resembling a giant bull. It was none other than the exploding Asaurus. The monster opened its mouth, and a firebomb exploded inside. Gregor tried to negotiate with the monster, but he couldn't. There was an explosion, and the boy was thrown several meters away. Suddenly, Okarkal flew off Gregor's shoulder and flew forward. The wind began to dissipate around him. The guy realized that Okarkal was a second-star monster who could help him. Meanwhile, the exploding Asaurus was raging. He wanted to wipe the city off the face of the earth as quickly as possible. However, little Okarkal bravely confronted him. The explosive Saurus had to be distracted by the croaking monster. Gregor took advantage of this. While the monster was fighting Okarkal, he wounded it with a sharp shovel. The guy wanted revenge for his destroyed house. 10 minutes later, the Exploderosaurus was destroyed, its core glowing amber. Gregor decided to give it to Okarkal as a snack. After all, he had worked hard today. However, the little monster did not react to the boy's actions. Something else caught his attention. A moment later, a whole herd of explosives appeared in front of Gregor. A streamer named Colin and his cameraman Jacob watched all of this from afar. The latter believed that they should help Gregor. Colin did not want to do this. He ordered Jacob to shut up and continue filming him. Moreover, Colin hoped that Gregor would die today. The thing is, the boy was his competitor. Meanwhile, Gregor and Okarkal were doing their best to defeat the explosives. The guy decided to deal with each monster in turn. True, it was extremely difficult for him to do this. Gregor was literally on the verge of death. He was also terribly indignant that this time the gods did not help him at all. Suddenly, a notification appeared before the boy's eyes that God alone had finally taken his side. It turns out that Gregor has almost unlocked some kind of suffering bonus. When the boy learned about this, he had hope. Now he was ready to fight to the last. Besides, now there were 15 gods watching Gregor. The boy asked Okarkal to stop the explosive's breath attack for at least a moment. Meanwhile, Gregor himself bravely rushed into battle. The boy was already being watched by 16 gods. In addition, he received an incentive bonus. Suddenly, Gregor notices that Okarkal has stopped. The same thing happened with the terrifying explosives. The guy realized that time had stopped around him. In the sky, Gregor saw 2 strange pyramids with various numbers written on them. The god suggested that the boy guess any number. Gregor tried to focus on a specific number. A moment later, the pyramids showed the number 8. This was the number the boy had guessed. The guy felt his body literally fill with strength. He also received a notification that chakra was now available to him. Gregor felt as if he could do absolutely anything now. To start with, the guy, of course, decided to deal with the explosives. Without wasting time, Gregor bravely rushed at the monsters. The guy could clearly see all the moves of his opponents. Gregor felt fantastic. He was confident of his victory. Colin and Jake, who watched the battle from afar, were amazed. The guy swung his shovel left and right, literally cutting the explosives in half. At some point, the chakra's duration ended. But Gregor dealt with all the monsters. Everyone was happy about the guy's victory, except for streamer Colin. Gregor irritated him greatly with his strength, agility, and confidence. Later, the boy began to look at what was left of his house. He also noticed that little Okarkal had disappeared somewhere. It turns out that he was trying to take the core of the explosive saurus. Gregor had nothing against it. Besides, the boy felt bad. Suddenly, the boy felt the ground begin to give way from under his feet. A moment later, something began to break through to the surface with a rumble. Gregor was thrown back several meters. When he hit the ground, he saw a 2-star fortillaria in front of him. Now the boy realized why Okarkal was shouting so much. The equipment was far too big. Gregor saw the soldiers raise the barriers and prepare to fire. The boy realized that they were being provocative. The best thing to do would be to simply move away from the fortillaria. However, the soldiers, unfortunately, thought only about their own reward. Gregor shouted at them to run away, because what they were facing was no ordinary 2-star fortillery. However, it was too late. A second later, a powerful explosion was heard. A large number of shells rained down on people, but strangely enough, they all flew past Gregor. The soldiers began to shout loudly for help. Gregor noticed a familiar female figure in the sky. It was none other than Donatella. Without much effort, she was able to stop the projectiles. The woman ordered the soldiers to retreat immediately. They listened to Donatella's words and ran away. After that, the woman made one light wave of her hand. All the shells at the same moment changed direction and flew back towards the fortillaria. However, they didn't leave even a small scratch on the equipment. Donatella, of course, didn't like this very much. Only now did she see Gregor. The woman shouted for him to get away from the fortillaria immediately. But the guy was terribly interested in the question of why the technology wasn't attacking him. Meanwhile, the shelling of the fortillaria had completely ended. The soldiers decided that now they could finally begin to attack. However, within seconds, the fort was back in full combat readiness. Gregor finally guessed that the technology simply did not perceive him as a target. At some point, Okerkul began to prophesy something good for the boy. After thinking for a moment, Gregor headed straight for the fort. As the guy had predicted, he wasn't at all interesting to her, but Gregor still couldn't understand why this was happening. Suddenly, to the boy's surprise, a hole appeared in the fortilleria. Gregor ordered Okarkulu to turn on the camera and begin broadcasting. A moment later, the boy greeted the audience and announced that today he would be heading to the center of the fort. Then Gregor resolutely stepped into the hole. The audience held their breath. It was very dark inside, so the guy had to turn on the flashlight on his phone. What the boy saw made him quite worried. However, he managed to quickly pull himself together and smile joyfully at the audience. After that, he moved forward. It was a good thing the camera didn't show how much his legs were shaking. Later, he saw a blue monster. It was she who was considered a 2-star monster named Fortilleria. Gregor could not understand what this monster was doing now. He was also extremely surprised by the house that was located here. Without hesitation, the boy decided to go inside this structure. As it turned out, this building was no different from the one that the government decided to give Gregor. It turns out that Fortilleria recreated an exact copy of his house. Suddenly, the boy realized that all this happened thanks to chakra. The thing is that the monster was feeding on human energy. Realizing this, Gregor quickly said goodbye to the audience and ended the broadcast. He felt so tired that, without thinking, he lay down on the bed that was there and immediately fell asleep. While Gregor slept in the middle of the Fortilleria, certain changes occurred to his body. The gods decided to give the boy another significant gift. When Gregor woke up and went to the mirror, he literally didn't recognize himself. His body tightened and became covered with a large amount of muscle. The boy was amazed and pleased at the same time. He was now unrecognizable. He easily managed to lift the box of shells. Gregor did it with one hand. Full of strength and energy, he left the Fortilleria. He was attacked on the street by a crowd of bloggers and journalists. Everyone was curious about whether what the guy showed in his broadcast was true. Gregor has so far refused to make any comments. He quickly slipped out of the crowd of people, leaving them with nothing. Suddenly, the boy crashed into something tall and bulky. It was the deputy commander of the village seizure squad, Ernest. He smiled amiably at Gregor. The man had an interesting proposal, which he immediately voiced. Ernest was willing to give Gregor the equipment made from a 4-star monster, and in return, the position of commander of the capture squad. In return, the man wanted the boy to join them. Gregor thought for a moment. Of course, the equipment was very valuable, but it wasn't even next to his shovel. Besides, to kill Zeroblade, he had to compete alone. With a sigh, Gregor refused Ernest's tempting offer. Exactly 1 month ago, an important meeting was held at Seoul City Hall. A young, handsome brunette, Commander Tybalt, visited there. The man was curious to see if everything was going according to his plan. The City Hall employees assured the young man that everything was fine. However, something still worried them greatly. It was about the invasion of the 2-star Zloakarps. Tybalt was not alarmed by this news. He completely trusted the assault squad. Ministry representatives noted that according to intelligence, the monsters had mutated and doubled in size. Tybalt was not scared. He said that the main task now was to prevent this information from spreading. In addition, the number of hunters refusing to cooperate with the authorities was now increasing. Such individualists posed a greater danger than the monsters themselves. This threatened rebellion. Ministry employees agreed with the young man. Independent hunters were becoming a significant problem. Smiling, Tybalt suggested reducing the number of these warriors. The men gladly agreed to carry out the captain's order. In his mind, Tybalt was already bathing in the rays of glory and listening to odes of praise. Meanwhile, Gregor started his new stream. He explained to the audience that every year around this time, the 10-star Wolverine gets out of control. Suddenly, a powerful explosion sounded behind the boy. A moment later, Gregor noticed that the car that had been heading towards the river had sped back. A whole pack of angry Zloakarps was racing after her. The hunters sitting in the car tried to fight off the monsters, but their chances of survival were slim. Gregor immediately bravely rushed to their aid. He jumped up sharply and activated his shovel. After the boy stuck it in the ground, the Zloakarps scattered in all directions. But that wasn't the end. Other monsters came from somewhere. There were too many of them. Gregor had to engage them in battle. Suddenly, a message appeared before his eyes, saying that one of the gods was calling him. The guy didn't know how to respond to the challenge in this situation. Before his eyes, it is unclear where some strange thing has appeared. A second later, a blue fortilleria emerged from it. She created a telephone on the handle of Gregor's shovel. Subsequently, a strong explosion was heard, which threw the boy away from the epicenter of the events. When he came to, he saw that all the Zloakarps had been destroyed. But Gregor understood that most likely, the monster infestation near the river was even worse than it was here. The hunters sitting in their cars saw the boy run away. The men spotted one Wolverine, who was apparently still alive. A hunter named Fred thought he could make some extra money from this monster. However, his brother Ted was against it. He advised his partner to get out. He listened. Meanwhile, the riverbank was literally crawling with Zloakarps. The best hunters, led by Donatella, fought against them. The woman noted that the monsters were several times larger than last year. In addition, they had strange mutations. Donatella had never seen such types of Zloakarps before. The woman understood perfectly well that the bulk of the monsters should be destroyed as quickly as possible before the situation became many times worse. Ernest fought bravely alongside Donatella. It was he who managed to create a protective barrier against the Zloakarps. While he did his best to hold back the invasion of monsters, his squad held its ground. However, the fight against the Zloakarps this time was extremely difficult for the hunters. Ernest began to suspect that the government had somehow had a hand in this monster invasion. He was worried that, among other things, there were also fast species of Zloakarps, and also dangerous defensive types of monsters, which were almost impossible to break through. At some point, the Zloakarps surrounded one of Ernest's squad members, a boy named Franz. He began to call loudly for help. One of the monsters was already ready to swallow him. Having lost all hope, Franz simply began to pray. Suddenly, Donatella came to his aid. She managed to push the boy a few meters away from the monster. Ernest sincerely thanked the woman for saving his soldier. Donatella noted that there was no time to delay. After that, a powerful explosion occurred, destroying several dozen Zloakarps. Ernest was delighted with the skills of the beautiful Donatella. However, it was too early to relax. There were still enough Zloakarps left. Unexpectedly, Tybalt appeared on the riverbank along with representatives of the assault squad. Ernest was not happy about this meeting. He hated this man with all his heart. Tybalt ordered the representatives of the assault squad to deal with the Zloakarps. Without thinking twice, they launched an artillery missile system. A second later, hundreds of missiles rained down on the heads of the Zloakarps. The lightning squad was next to take action. Its representatives began to shock the monsters with electric shock. Tybalt was happy because now the hunting grounds were under the control of the raiding party. This meant that they would own 80% of all the prey. When the soldiers from Ernest's unit learned of this, they were terribly angry. Moreover, they had suffered a lot of casualties. Ernest himself couldn't stand it, went up to Tybalt and grabbed him by the jacket. He began to curse the man with the dirtiest words he knew. Ernest was convinced that Tybalt had planned everything in advance. He replied that it was all nonsense. However, his sly smile said otherwise. Then Ernest asked Tybalt why there was so much military equipment and an incredible number of hunters from the lightning squad. Ernest understood that it was impossible to prepare so well without knowing the scale of the disaster in advance. Tybalt laughed and replied that the young man was simply jealous of him. Ernest was ready to hit him, but Donatella intervened. She ordered the young people to stop arguing. The woman was convinced that now was not the time for this kind of conversation. Meanwhile, Tybalt was called by his soldiers. He moved towards them. The man ordered the assault squad to act according to the previous plan. A few minutes later, the soldiers began attacking the Zloakarps. The monsters began to literally writhe in terrible pain. The soldiers also heated the water in the river as much as possible. This forced the giant leader of the ghouls to come ashore. Upon seeing him, Donatella and Ernest realized that he was their main target. Tybalt ordered the assault squad to proceed to the second stage. The soldiers obeyed and prepared reinforced harpoons. A few seconds later, they began shooting at the leader of the Zloakarps. The monster roared in pain. He was not prepared for such an attack against himself. Despite this, the leader of the Zloakarps did not even flinch. Ernest considered the actions of the assault squad a big mistake. It was obvious that the soldiers would not be able to stall for time. Soon the mutant would drag them into the water. Tybalt ordered the assault squad to use a lightning bolt. The soldiers obeyed the order and shocked the leader of the Zloakarps with an electric shock. Donatella was in despair. She understood that this way the monster could literally be fried. Tybalt decided to show everyone the true power of the storm. He aimed a stream of his energy straight at the leader of the Zloakarps. Donatella suggested that Tybalt was using some kind of temporary equipment to temporarily enhance his abilities. He, in turn, ordered his soldiers to extract the core from the leader of the Zloakarps before regeneration began. Ernest told Tybalt that there might be more than one giant among the monsters this year. He smiled defiantly and replied that he was ready for such a scenario. Meanwhile, not even a few hours had passed when a second giant monster appeared. Tybalt prepared to attack. He was confident in his abilities. It is worth noting that at this time he was also broadcasting. Viewers were delighted with the young man's abilities. However, the most important thing for Tybalt was to gain his father's recognition. To do this, it was necessary to show that the assault squad could do its job well, even without him. The soldiers tried to quickly extract the core from the monster before its regeneration began. Tybalt called the commander of the assault squad to him and said that he was leaving everything to him. Now it was important to show the other squads that they were no match for them. Tybalt decided it was time for him to leave the battlefield. At this moment, he wanted to meet his father more than ever. While Tybalt was driving in the car, the soldiers reported to him about the situation with the Zloakarps. They were currently working on extracting the core from the first leader of the Zloakarps. Besides, the second mutant had been almost completely defeated. Tybalt was terribly pleased by such news. Less than 10 minutes later, he was informed of his victory over the long-legged leader of the Zloakarps. The soldiers immediately rushed to get the core out of it. True, this mutant was still alive, so the representatives of the assault squad had to act extremely carefully. Despite this, the soldiers quickly extracted the core from the monster. However, they didn't have time to rejoice properly when the first leader of the Zloakarps evolved and headed for the assault squad. The soldiers, despite their fatigue, prepared to attack again. In a moment, they were firing at the monster with full force. But it didn't seem to care. Having evolved, the leader of the Zombokarps became much stronger and more resilient than before. Then the lightning squad took action. Electric discharges flew at the monster. That didn't work either. A minute later, the leader of the Zloakarps attacked himself. Several dozen members of the assault squad were torn to pieces. The commander understood that he had no chance of survival. Suddenly, Ernest came to his aid. He stood between the man and the monster. However, Ernest could only restrain the leader of the ghouls for a while, not destroy him. He shouted to the assault squad commander to try to unite with the soldiers who remained alive. The man didn't have to repeat himself twice. He immediately ran away from the monster. A few seconds later, the leader of the Zloakarps hit Ernest with his giant fist. The young man could not withstand such a blow and fell to the ground. Donatella came to his aid in time. The woman was amazed at the power of the evolved mutant. The leader of the Zloakarps roared furiously. He was ready to destroy anyone who came into his sight. Donatella tried to apply telekinesis to him, but the monster wouldn't take it. Suddenly, the monster grabbed the woman with its sharp claws. But Gregor, who came from nowhere, came to her aid. He hit the monster on the paw with a shovel, and it released Donatella. The woman was very surprised to see the boy. Gregor smiled and declared that he was ready to begin hunting the leader of the Zloakarps. At the same time, Ernest regained consciousness. He had a headache after the fall, but generally felt fine. A few minutes later, the man, along with Donatella, watched the battle between Gregor and the leader of the Zloakarps. The boy fearlessly waved his shovel in front of the monster's nose. He noticed that his body was moving differently. Gregor assumed that his chakra had returned to him. At some point, the leader of the Zloakarps grabbed the boy by the leg and lifted him off the ground. But Gregor quickly freed himself by simply cutting off the monster's hand with a sharp shovel. Then the unexpected happened. The leader of the evildoers regenerated and within seconds grew a new arm. Gregor felt bewildered. He had never even thought that the monster was capable of such a thing. Meanwhile, the monster began to devour the corpses of other Zloakarps. The boy assumed that cannibalism helped it recover faster. Without hesitation, Gregor stuck his shovel into the ground. But the leader of the Zloakarps continued to regenerate. Gregor realized that he was now at a great disadvantage. After thinking a bit, the guy decided to change his position. But unfortunately, it didn't help him much. Then Gregor tried to enlist the help of the Fortaleria. But the leader of the Zloakarps did not react at all. His regeneration was happening incredibly quickly. The guy assumed that he was simply too far from the Fortaleria, so it simply couldn't help him. Meanwhile, Okarkal was filming the fight between Gregor and the leader of the Zloakarps. Even the guy's most loyal fans no longer believed in his victory over the monster. Suddenly, Okarkal let out a loud cry, predicting Gregor's success. At that very moment, the leader of the Zloakarps rushed at the boy. Gregor thought that his end had clearly come. A second later, an explosion of incredible power was heard. Ernest and Donatella realized that the shell had come from somewhere. Be that as it may, he saved Gregor, who had already said goodbye to life. The boy understood that he owed his salvation to the Fortaleria. But it was too early to rejoice. The leader of the Zloakarps, although he had lost his balance, did not die. Gregor realized that to defeat the monster, he needed the power of the core. The boy wondered if he had a power similar to hers. A message appeared before Gregor's eyes that 17 gods were now watching him. This inspired the boy somewhat. He felt an interest in his own person. Gregor tried to remember the sensations his chakra gave him. His body began to fill with the energy of power. A minute later, the leader of the Zloakarps was ready to attack again. Gregor realized that it was time to act. He focused on his inner energy. After that, he struck a well-aimed blow at the monster. The monster roared. Terrible pain literally tore through its body. A blue core fell from the chest of the leader of the Zloakarps. Ernest was amazed by what he saw. He couldn't believe that the former cameraman had defeated the leader of the Zloakarps. Donatella realized that Gregor was no ordinary hunter. Gregor himself was surprised that he managed to destroy the monster so quickly. Meanwhile, Okarkal grabbed the core of the leader of the Zloakarps in his beak. The boy began to peck at the little monster, hoping that it would immediately spit him out. However, it was too late. Okarkal had swallowed the kernel. The next day, the central headquarters of the assault detachment was restless. Tybalt had to report to the management. This made the young man feel very bad. He explained that his soldiers were unable to destroy the leader of the Zloakarps because Gregor appeared. The head of the assault squad, Adrian, who was also Tybalt's father, didn't care about his son's justification. That's why it was terribly shameful that the most precious person was disappointed in him. He was sure that the assault squad commander, Lindsay, had taken care of this. Adrian declared that the young man was unworthy of his position. After that, a video of Gregor appeared on the large screen in Adrian's office. Tybalt understood that his father wanted to give his position to the boy. He began to fervently beg Adrian not to do this. But the man had already decided everything. The man coldly ordered Tybalt to shut up. Adrian despised his son for being guilty of dishonoring the assault squad. Tybalt began to apologize to his father in a trembling voice. Lindsay whispered in Adrian's ear that the young man had obviously realized his guilt. Frankly, she really liked Tybalt. However, the woman's words had no effect on the head of the assault squad. Tybalt had to leave his father's office. Adrian stated that he had an important errand for Lindsay. He wanted the woman to learn as much as possible about Gregor. It was important to Adrian that the boy become their ally, not their enemy. Lindsay allowed herself to remark that her boss thought too highly of Gregor. Adrian smiled. The thing is, the guy looked an awful lot like an old colleague of his. Lindsay guessed that it was Gloucester Black. Adrian added that he was also going to involve his youngest son, Marcus, in the matter. The next day, a press conference was held at the Korean branch of the Monster Fighting Association. Outraged journalists wanted to know if it was true that people in the association knew about the Zloakarp mutation. They were also very interested in the future fate of Fortaleria. The association's chairman, Robert Bean, felt embarrassed. He was not prepared for such questions. The assistant told him that Gregor was not answering his calls. This fact further spoiled Robert's mood. Due to the defeat of the assault squad, they found themselves in a very unpleasant situation. And Gregor was streaming at that time. First of all, he introduced the audience to Fortaleria. It turns out that this little monster was very soft, and he had a whole squad of his own clones. Gregor was about to tell what would happen if the Fortaleria was turned the other way. Suddenly, an urgent notification came to his phone. The thing is, the Zeroblade has finally appeared. Someone spotted it in China. The boy quickly apologized to the audience, explaining that he had to immediately go in search of his sworn enemy. Because of the monsters, travel abroad became severely limited, and aerial technology became a rare first-class pleasure. However, Gregor desperately needed a plane. The guy promised that the one from the audience who would help him with the flight would be invited by him to the Fortaleria. Princess in the polka dot on the other side of the screen decided that she would never miss such an opportunity. Suddenly, Gregor saw a message from her saying that the boy was wanted by the government. The boy once again thought that the princess and the pea was no ordinary girl. Sighing, he said that the government representatives should find a way to contact him themselves. Robert blamed Tybalt for everything that happened. He did not deny his guilt in any way. Finally, Robert managed to get through to Gregor. Without letting the man even say a word, the guy asked if the man had a plane. An angry Robert shouted into the phone that Gregor's request was too broad. Then the unexpected happened. Tybalt approached the man and grabbed the phone from him. He informed Gregor that the plane would be provided to the boy by the assault squad. The young man's voice seemed painfully familiar to Gregor. However, he was very happy that the issue with the plane was resolved so quickly. The very next morning, the guy flew to Western China. After several hours in the sky, the pilot informed Gregor that they were nearing their destination. What the boy saw through the plane window surprised him greatly. China was extremely different from what Gregor had previously imagined about the country. The guy didn't expect that the assault squad would go to meet him and give him a plane. Apparently, this was how they tried to save their reputation after the recent story with the Wolverine. But Gregor didn't care. Right now, he just wanted to get to his destination as quickly as possible. A few minutes later, the plane landed. Stepping on the ground and looking around, a thought flashed through the boy's mind. He doubted that he had been taken to the right place because there was nothing there. However, the pilot noted that he delivered Gregor according to the coordinates. After that, the plane flew back. The guy sincerely hoped that they would come back for him after he finished everything here. A second later, he received an incoming call from a Chinese number. Gregor decided to listen to his intuition and not answer the call. Instead, he began his stream, telling viewers that he had flown to China from Korea. Gregor had no idea that at that moment, someone was watching him intently from the slope. The guy admitted to fans that he went to a remote country just to find the Zeroblade. Suddenly, a stern male voice called out to Gregor. Looking back, the boy saw a young rider on a horse. He asked Gregor what family he was from. But since the rider spoke Chinese, the boy didn't understand anything. Not receiving an answer to his question, the young man became quite angry. Gregor, meanwhile, received a gift from the gods. The writer literally began to demand that the boy tell him about his affiliation. Finally, the boy began to understand him. However, despite this, Gregor was in no hurry to answer. The young man became so angry that he was ready to eliminate the guy. But Gregor quickly took out his sharp shovel. Seeing her, the young man literally froze in place. Fear flashed in his eyes. Noticing this, Gregor hid the shovel. He told the writer that he was not an enemy, and that was why he had come to China to find the Zeroblade. After thinking for a moment, the young man replied that Gregor was apparently looking for the one they called the Devil of Heaven. Gregor was extremely interested in this information. The writer laughed, declaring that the boy would never be able to defeat the Zeroblade. He also mentioned that a person would be arriving soon, whom Gregor must definitely meet. It turns out that in China, Okarkuls were very respected. So, seeing the monster on the guy's shoulder, the writer began to speak to him much more respectfully. Moreover, the young man offered Gregor help in finding the Zeroblade. True, the guy felt a certain threat in this offer. He was afraid of falling into a trap. Suddenly, a green pendant around the writer's neck lit up with a magical light. A moment later, the young man pulled out his weapon, the fire sword of Sur. Then he tried to strike Gregor, but he only yawned. The writer's strength was not enough to cause him any harm. It seemed that this was exactly what the young man had been waiting for. He introduced himself as Harry and assured the boy that he sincerely wanted to help him. After thinking for a moment, he agreed. Gregor understood that the writer could really be useful to him. He also told Harry his name. The writer noted that he was the 13th son of the Ha clan. Gregor had heard a lot about this clan. It was said that its representatives were very skilled in battle. A few minutes later, the young people set off. Gregor had the feeling that he was not in China, but in some fictional fantasy land. The buildings here were primitive, and the armor and equipment worn by the soldiers did not meet modern trends. The locals looked at the boy with fear. Soon, Harry led Gregor to a luxurious palace, the Royal Pavilion of Flame. The writer explained to the guards that the boy was their guest, who wished to meet the headman. A few minutes later, a young woman came out to them, the beautiful Cordelia. She personally escorted Gregor and Harry to the palace. The boy was amazed by the luxury and wealth that appeared around him. And his attention was also attracted by women of extraordinary beauty who were calmly strolling through the palace. Soon Gregor found himself near the chairman's office. There, waiting for him, was none other than the famous Jackie Ho. It was a small, smiling fat man. He greeted the boy joyfully. Jackie Ho asked Harry and Cordelia to leave them alone with Gregor. Of course, they immediately hurried to carry out their husband's order. The boy felt a little scared. The man did not inspire confidence in him. Jackie Ho said that he hadn't been nervous in over 60 years, but now he felt it again. Hearing this, Gregor was quite surprised. He would not have given the man more than 40 years. Jackie Ho smiled and explained why he looked much younger than his age. The thing is, the monster's core isn't just a source of superpowers. It's the monster itself. If you cultivate it, you can reveal the properties of your body along with other powers. Adrian, from the lands where Gregor came from, was very similar to Jackie Ho in this regard. The boy realized that Tybalt's father controlled all the information and ran the village. But now Gregor was preoccupied with other questions. He asked Jackie Ho directly if he could determine the location of the Zeroblade. The fat man laughed and said that the boy was in too much of a hurry. Turns out, his soldiers were already looking for the Zeroblade, so Gregor just had to wait a little longer. Jackie Ho suggested that Gregor take a break from the road. He said that his daughter Regan would take care of him. The guy immediately noticed that the girl was extremely beautiful. Regan, meanwhile, smiled and gently called Gregor to follow her. The guy knew perfectly well that Jackie Ho was up to something. But despite this, he decided to play along with the man. Moreover, he was ready to do anything to catch the Zeroblade. An hour later, Gregor was sitting on a golden bench with the beautiful Regan. The boy was surprised that the girl didn't leave him alone, as if she was guarding him. Regan justified herself by saying that her father had ordered her to show hospitality to Gregor. At some point, the girl's eyes lit up with a red glow. She began to beg the boy in a gentle voice to look at her. Gregor understood that they were trying to hypnotize him, but he could not resist it. Regan began to ask the boy to tell her his secret. Gregor was about to say something when he suddenly felt as if someone was pushing him in the back. At that moment, he came to his senses. The guy told the girl that he wasn't going to tell her anything. Regan was surprised. Gregor was the first person who was not affected by her hypnosis. After that, the guy felt like the girl was trying to get into his head, thanks to her superpowers. He began to demand that Regan explain what was happening. The girl was silent. Then Gregor activated his powers. In Regan's eyes, he saw the scene that had taken place a few hours ago. It turns out that Jackie Ho ordered his daughter to bring Gregor's shovel. Regan tried to argue, but her father wouldn't listen. He threatened the girl that he would kill her brother and starve the entire nation. Gregor felt Regan's incredible sadness and despair. He realized he had just seen her memory. He couldn't even imagine that his chakra was capable of such a thing. Gregor suggested that the girl finally talk frankly. A few minutes later, they were both standing in front of Jackie Ho. The guy began to demand explanations from the fat man. He pretended not to understand what was being said. Then he turned away from Gregor and took something out of his kimono. A moment later, he turned around. Jackie Ho had a gun in his hands. He fired it at the boy. Gregor, who had not expected this, barely managed to dodge. The guy quickly took out his shovel and aimed it at Jackie Ho. But the man was not frightened. Gregor was a human being, so one bullet was enough to make him a corpse. Jackie Ho began to demand that the boy give him the shovel. Gregor, of course, flatly refused to do this. Moreover, he told the fat man that a shovel would not solve all the problems. Jackie Ho shouted at the boy to shut up. He assured him that there was no more hope in his land. The land abandoned by the state will soon be taken by starvation. Jackie Ho personally tried to negotiate with the government, but it was unprofitable to hold their territory. With Gregor's shovel, they could have killed Zeroblade. Then their requests would definitely be heeded. The guy didn't understand why Jackie Ho was spreading false information that the monster was here for this reason. Sighing, he threw the shovel to the fat man. The man tried to catch it, but at the last moment, the shovel fell directly on Jackie Ho's leg. The man literally roared in terrible pain. He tried to shoot Gregor with the gun, but fortunately, he managed to attack first. The impact knocked the boy, Jackie Ho, back several meters. He hit his head hard. Blood spurted everywhere. The man died. Seeing this, Regan screamed loudly. At that very moment, a confused Harry burst into the room. Gregor realized that the situation had become critical. Harry, unable to contain his anger, said through gritted teeth that he had trusted the boy. Now he shouldn't even hope to return home alive. After these words, the young man quickly drew his sword. Flames swirled around Harry in some kind of wild dance. Gregor began to think about what to do next. The young man said that despite all his father's shortcomings, he loved him. The next moment, Harry rushed at the boy with the sword. But something unexpected happened. Regan stood in front of him and Gregor. She shouted to her brother to stop. Shocked, Harry obeyed his sister. However, he did not understand the girl's motives. The young man could not understand why Regan stood up for the enemy of their family. Sighing heavily, the girl pointed out that their father was a bad person. She asked her brother in a gentle voice to look into her eyes. After that, she activated her hypnotic abilities. Gregor realized that Regan was the owner of the Iron Core. It made it possible not only to read thoughts, but also to broadcast them. At this very moment, the girl was showing Harry important scenes related to their father's crimes. The young man saw how Jackie Ho tried to rule the village and how he wanted to kill Gregor. After coming out of hypnosis, Harry sincerely apologized to the boy. He also assured me that he now owed Gregor. That same night, the rebellion began. Nicoletta Sun and the Black Eye Squad rebelled. Gregor asked Harry to tell him more about these people. The young man replied that the Black Wolf Squad had always protected their family. Nicoletta was none other than his stepmother. the woman began to demand that they give her a shovel. Gregor was already starting to get annoyed that everyone was trying to appropriate his weapon. He ordered Harry to protect his sister Regan. Gregor decided to take Nicoletta and the Black Wolf squad on himself. Harry didn't even have time to answer when the boy pointed his shovel at the rebels. At the same second, a dozen people were thrown several meters away from the palace. Harry was struck by the boy's incredible strength. Meanwhile, Gregor had already moved towards his shovel. It was now stuck in the ground near the palace. Several members of the Black Wolf squad tried to pull it out, but to no avail. The guy quickly dispersed the people and pulled his artifact out of the ground. The warriors of the Black Wolf squad drew their weapons and prepared to massacre Gregor. A few seconds later, they rushed at the boy from all sides. Gregor was not at a loss and swung his shovel. Nicoletta, who had been watching from the sidelines, realized that the rumors that the boy had almost killed Zeroblade were true. At this very moment, Jackie Ho came to life before Harry and Regan's eyes. The brother and sister realized that they had to get out of the palace as soon as possible. They noticed that the core in the ring that was on the man's finger lit up. The young people had no time to take a step back when Jackie Ho's body began to undergo a transformation. A few seconds later, the man turned into a giant spider. Harry ordered his sister to immediately hide behind him. The monster has not yet reached full 3-star strength, having only just hatched from Jackie Ho's body. Despite this, the spider had already rushed at Harry. He pushed the young man a few meters away from him. Regan was very scared for her brother. Meanwhile, the monster was near her. Harry used all the effort he had to get up from the floor after falling. When he did, he saw that Spider was hovering over his sister. Harry couldn't let the monster kill Regan, so he quickly activated his core. Then, without wasting any time, he boldly attacked Spider. The young man managed to wound the monster with his sword. Harry felt his strength increase significantly. It surprised him. In addition, the connection between the new moon and the nucleus has significantly strengthened. The spider, bleeding, howled in unbearable pain. Harry realized he had to act before the monster could recover. He wanted to destroy the disgusting spider immediately. He struck the monster again. The second injury made Spider suffer even more. He promised himself that he would definitely kill Harry and Regan, but initially he planned to do something different. Breaking the glass, he flew out into the street and loomed over Gregor, Nicoletta, and the warriors from the Black Wolf squad. The monster wanted to find a new vessel for its essence. After some thought, he chose Nicoletta for his case. The woman felt someone looking down at her. She was about to raise her head when suddenly her body was pierced by hellish fire. He scattered the warriors of the Black Wolf squad in all directions. A second later, Spider attacked Nicoletta with lightning speed. The representatives of the Black Wolf squad were very scared, but they didn't know how to help their lady. Gregor was surprised to see the giant spider. He did not understand where this monster came from. The monster wrapped Nicoletta in a cocoon. The woman begged for help from her warriors, but to no avail. Not even a minute passed before Spider flew up with Nicoletta. Finally, the representatives of the Black Wolves squad realized if they wanted to save their mistress, they had to act immediately. Meanwhile, the monster and its victim fled at full speed. The warriors ran after it. Gregor realized that without a clear plan, it would not be possible to save Nicoletta. The spider ran to its lair and hid safely there. The warriors of the Black Wolf squad believed that together they could destroy the monster. They prepared to attack. Suddenly, the two men felt their bodies being connected by a thin, magical web. Very soon they found themselves in a giant cocoon, unable to even move. The other warriors watched as Spider pulled him towards him. But the most terrifying thing was that the monster was now Nicoletta. The monster had been reborn into her body. Despite this, the warriors of the Black Wolves squad rushed into the attack. It was important for them to save their comrades. The monster began to fight off its opponents with its paws and hands. A few minutes later, Gregor appeared near the spider's lair with a shovel in his hands. With him was Zloakarps. The little monster filmed everything in detail for the broadcast. Gregor was very surprised to realize that Spider had used Nicoletta's body. The spectators, seeing this monster, began to advise the boy to run as far away from it as possible. Suddenly, someone called Gregor on his mobile phone. They were representatives of the Chinese government. They didn't like that a streamer was shaming their nation. They wanted Gregor to end the broadcast. Moreover, they began to threaten the boy with violence. Gregor was terribly angry that he had been distracted at such a crucial moment. He dropped the challenge. Meanwhile, Zloakarps shouted, foretelling failure. The boy, of course, didn't like this. He shouted at the little monster to shut up immediately. At that very moment, the spider rushed at Gregor. Gregor managed to cover himself with a shovel. In fact, the boy was glad that the monster had dealt with the rebels. Gregor didn't even have to do anything himself. Suddenly, he saw a helicopter with a red star in the sky. It was the symbol of the Red Dragon, the fourth-ranked strike force in the world. Gregor realized that they wanted to kill not only Spider, but also him. The monster was almost defeated by the Red Dragon. They started shooting at him with helicopter gunships. But this attack didn't kill Spider, it only made him stronger. There was a powerful explosion, and some of the helicopters in the sky were torn to pieces. The monster's strength grew and grew. At some point, he launched a beam of impact force into the sky. Gregor couldn't believe his eyes. He had no idea the monster was capable of such a thing. And the shock waves from the spider flew along the rotors one after another. Next, the monster used its magical web. Breaking into pieces, the helicopters began to fall to the ground. Suddenly, signaling good news, Zloakarps howled. Now Gregor didn't understand anything. What's more, even he was beginning to lose hope of salvation. He understood perfectly well that Spider was the owner of an extraordinary intellect, because he understood well when and how best to use his skills. Despite all this, Gregor understood perfectly well that he had no reason to compete with this monster. After thinking a little, the boy decided to flee the battlefield before it was too late. Of course, the gods didn't like this. They made this clear to Gregor in their messages, and one of them even prepared a donut for the guy. Gregor was interested in this. As it turned out, that was actually all he expected. Smiling happily, he declared that he was ready to fight Spider. A red dragon fighter named Benedict, who managed to survive, could not believe that the strike force had been destroyed by one monster. Despite all the power of their squad, the reason for their defeat was Nicoletta's intelligence and memory. She was a person with superpowers, so she had extensive experience in fighting. And the woman was also well-versed in modern technologies. It was obvious that the Red Dragon fighters had no chance against this monster. Suddenly, swinging a shovel, Gregor rushed at the monster. He wanted to destroy the monster's core in one fell swoop, but he failed. On the contrary, Gregor's actions angered the monster even more. And she also realized that under no circumstances should she fall under the blade of a shovel. At first, the monster decided to absorb others to become stronger itself. Besides, he couldn't leave those who hated him alive. Intense hatred flared in the monster's eyes. A second later, she flew into the sky. This surprised Gregor terribly. However, almost immediately he realized that the monster was moving towards Harry and Regan. The boy decided to immediately run after the monster. Suddenly, he felt his shovel become several times heavier. And for some reason, the ion has become much longer. Even with the use of chakra, Gregor could not move the shovel from its place. He literally began to beg her to become normal again. Oddly enough, it worked. The shovel returned to its normal size. Some strange sign also appeared on it. The guy decided that this was the same gift from one of the gods. It turns out that now he could control the weight and length of the shovel. Viewers of the broadcast were delighted. They immediately began calling the item a legendary weapon. Gregor immediately tried to shorten the shovel. He succeeded. Now the boy was certain that he could reach Harry and Regan in a matter of seconds. The brother and sister were trying to hide from the monster in their father's palace at that time. But unfortunately, the chances of salvation were very small. The monster was already looming over poor Harry and Regan. the spider pushed the young man with force, and he fell to the floor. The monster was preparing to strike the decisive blow. Suddenly, Gregor appeared behind her with a shovel in his hands. The boy quickly struck the monster. He fell to the floor, not fully understanding what had happened. Standing up, he began to wonder what he should do with Gregor. However, the boy did not hesitate and attacked the monster again. The blow was accurate. Wounded, the monster roared in unbearable pain. Before he could regain consciousness, Gregor threw the shovel at him. The object went right through the monster's body. The monster was finished. A joyful Harry and Regan ran up to the boy. Gregor told them that he had to go. This confused the brother and sister. The guy explained that his work in this area was over. He had been deceived and was trying to figure out what to do next. Then Gregor learned new information about the awakening of the core and fought with Spider. However, he was worried that the shovel still continued to ring. The guy suggested that something might have happened to Fortilleria. Suddenly, Regan asked to go with Gregor. The guy was surprised. After thinking for a while, he slowly approached the girl. Then he placed his palm on Regan's face. Scenes from Gregor's past flashed before the girl's eyes. She saw his mother, father, and little sister, Zeroblade in the dark sky, the death of the boy's closest relatives, and how he promised himself to avenge their deaths. When Gregor removed his hand from Regan's face, the girl recoiled from him in horror. She had no idea that this guy had gone through so much grief. Gregor sadly noted that the path he was about to take was not worthy of Regan's company. He decided to go it alone. 10 minutes later, a helicopter flew towards the boy. Without a moment's hesitation, Gregor set off home. Frankly, he had already missed Korea. Sitting in the helicopter, the guy decided to check the news. It turns out that the ranking of the top 5 best monster streamers has changed. First place, of course, belonged to Captain Africa. He was a great hero of his continent, who fought the Murops army alone. Second place went to Army Man, the strongest Slavic fighter. In third place was Master Joseph, leader of the 6 Stars Strike Force. Fifth place in the ranking belonged to Euan Sheeran. This young man was able to cut through anything with his 2 swords. But the fourth place went to none other than Gregor. What's more, he managed to destroy the monsters of the new mutation. At the same time, many experts were inclined to believe that the boy's shovel was a separate monster. First, it was very heavy, and no one but Gregor could carry it. Secondly, it was this tool that Zeroblade was wounded with. Thirdly, everyone recently learned about a new property of a shovel, to stretch in size. Gregor was quite amused by the experts' thoughts. He was also very pleased to be in the ranking of the best monster streamers. Looking out the helicopter window, the boy saw the Sea of Death. This meant that they would soon arrive in Korea. Gregor thought that Okerkul had been a great help to him in his adventures, and for that, he was very grateful to the little monster. Suddenly, the helicopter began to sway from side to side. Some giant insect hovered above him. A few seconds later, she broke the helicopter window. Gregor realized that he was facing a monster named Murops. This creature was considered extremely dangerous, as it carried death on its wings. Gregor could not understand how the monster ended up here, because Africa was always considered its place of residence. The guy decided to try to destroy Murops before he broke anything else in the helicopter. However, the boy did not have time to do anything. The monster attacked the aircraft again. And a few seconds later, Murops simply ran away. Gregor, having almost said goodbye to life, was terribly surprised by such an act of the monster. An hour later, the helicopter entered Korean airspace. Marcus was eagerly awaiting Gregor's return. The boy didn't know this, though. When the helicopter landed, Gregor calmly got out of it and walked forward. He felt terribly tired after his trip to China. Of course, Gregor had not expected to see Marcus in front of him right now. However, the boy was not at a loss. He told the man that he knew he was Adrian's youngest son, the head of the assault squad. Marcus pointed out that Gregor should go home with him. However, the boy saw no point in that. The man shouted that otherwise Gregor wouldn't make it to Seoul at such a late hour. But the boy didn't want to hear anything. He yawned wearily. Marcus was starting to get annoyed. The thing is, Lindsay had ordered him to take Gregor. The man began to beg the boy to come with him, promising to take Gregor in a limousine. At one point, the boy even thought that Marcus had apparently gone mad. He directly asked the man what he was up to. Marcus had to admit that he was following someone else's orders. Gregor guessed that Tybalt was involved in this story. Without waiting a moment, the boy ran away from Marcus. The man shouted to Gregor to stop, because now they were on the roof. But the boy didn't listen, and having properly accelerated, jumped down. Gregor ordered his shovel to immediately extend. The object obeyed and instantly changed in size. When the shovel stuck into the ground, the boy managed to hang on it, as if on a pole. Then the boy confidently moved forward towards the fort. Gregor took advantage of a new combination of shovel and chakra designed specifically for him. The thing is that chakra allowed him to develop high speed by reducing air resistance. Not even a minute passed before Gregor was there. However, what he saw confused him. Something extremely strange was happening to Fortaleria. It turns out that while the guy was away, a man had sneaked in. Now the blue monster has grabbed his head, refusing to let go. The man began to beg Gregor for help. The boy realized that the stranger was a representative of the assault squad. Obviously, he had not arrived here alone. An hour later, sitting in his room, Gregor was having a serious conversation with 3 assault squad members. The men honestly admitted to the boy that they had come to Fortaleria to find a rare iron core underground. But the little blue monsters almost killed them here. Gregor remembered Regan, who had an iron core. The way the girl could read minds was simply amazing. Sighing, the boy told the assault squad members that they could leave. The men were surprised that Gregor would let them go so easily. Touched, they fell at his feet and began to thank him for their salvation. Meanwhile, Okarkal was filming all of this for broadcast. Gregor turned his attention to the little blue monsters. He really didn't want them to do anything stupid because of hunger. Suddenly, one of the monsters crawled close to the boy. Gregor felt it begin to eat his chakra. This surprised the boy. The blue monster increased in size in a few seconds. Suddenly, Gregor received a message saying that the princess and the pea would be visiting him today. Without thinking twice, the guy decided to meet her. Meanwhile, part of the monster was recovered from the helicopter Gregor used to return to Korea. No one doubted that it was Murops who attacked the aircraft. The Murops were ants, but not at all hard-working. Their task was to enslave people. The speed of reproduction of these monsters was simply incredible. They have long since turned Africa into a veritable hell. Moreover, after the mutation, they had wings. All this meant only one thing. The Murops had a new queen. Not far from the outskirts of Korea, everyone was awakened by strange news. The hunters of the assault squad received a message that the Moors had appeared on their continent. Upon learning about this, Donatella was quite surprised. Spencer almost choked on the coffee he was drinking. Ernest sighed heavily. After all the hunters should have responded to this message. Less than 10 minutes later, Gregor arrived at his destination. The guy was terribly surprised to see in front of him a hunter of the highest rank named Alec. Rosemary Perry, a well-known mid-ranking hunter, was also there. She was chatting nicely with Spencer. A little later, Donatella appeared. The woman looked confident and calm. She apologized for being late, explaining that she was late because of her younger sister. Spencer said it was time to go. The company had no idea that Gregor was watching them closely. The guy had no desire to help the hunters, so after a few minutes he went about his business. Soon he found himself on one of the balconies of a high-rise building. A moment later, the princess and the pea appeared before him. She didn't expect to see a guy in her room, so she was a bit confused. Gregor immediately began to assure the woman that he was not a robber. Princess P didn't listen to him and quickly hid behind the curtains. The boy froze in place. He didn't know what to do next. The girl whispered that she would come out to Gregor when she was ready. Then, without wasting any time, Princess P quickly rushed to get ready. Gregor noticed that the girl reminded him a lot of someone. His younger sister behaved the same way if she didn't have time to go somewhere. 20 minutes later, Princess in the Polka Dot pulled herself together and confidently walked out to the boy. The girl immediately admitted that she was a fan of Gregor. She really liked the way he fought monsters. True, the girl kept quiet about her love for the boy. Gregor seemed to her very handsome, honest, courageous, and modest. That was exactly what a true hero should be like, in her opinion. The boy, meanwhile, announced that it was time for them to move to the fort. Little did Princess Polka Dot know that she would also have to move around on a shovel. Gregor quickly put his arm around the girl's shoulders and advised her to hold on tighter to him. After that, the boy straddled the shovel, and the young people flew forward. Princess Polka Dot confessed to Gregor that she used to be sick all the time, so she hardly ever left the house. The guy again noticed the girl's resemblance to his deceased sister. Suddenly, heralding danger, Zloakarps shouted. At that moment, the young people felt that something was coming towards them. Soon, they saw a giant Murops with wings. The monster was flying straight at them. Gregor couldn't understand how this monster had ended up here. The monster flew almost right up to the young people and prepared to attack. The boy, holding the shovel tightly with one hand and supporting Princess in the Polka Dot with the other, tried to think of something. He decided to at least try to kill the damned Murops. To do this, Gregor used the extension of the shovel. Then he struck a well-aimed blow at the monster. Red blood spurted from the wound on Murops' body. The boy saw the core and realized that the monster was finished. A moment later, Gregor and Princess in the Polka Dot landed. A second later, the body of a slain monster fell next to them. The guy couldn't believe that he had managed to destroy Murops. Princess in the Polka Dot, unable to hold back her tears, shouted that Gregor was the best monster streamer in the whole world. Zloakarps shouted again. The boy realized that trouble would await them again. Obviously, there were other Murops flying somewhere nearby. And indeed, very soon, the young people saw a whole flock of these monsters. Without thinking for a second, Gregor immediately covered the princess in the polka dots with himself. At the same time, the guy understood perfectly well that he was in serious trouble. Gregor ordered the girl to hide behind the boulders when he gave the signal. Having said this, the boy boldly and resolutely rushed forward. The terrible Moors were already very close. They were preparing to avenge the death of their comrade. Gregor used the extension of his shovel again, so he managed to cut one of the monsters in half. Another one followed, then another and another. The guy was terribly happy that he managed to destroy 4 Murops so quickly. There was one more monster left. Gregor was sure that he could kill it too in a matter of minutes. The monster ignored the boy and flew on. It turns out that she wasn't interested in Gregor, but in Princess in the Polka Dot. Murops loomed over the poor girl, preparing to strike her. Gregor immediately activated the extension of the shovel. However, it was too late. The monster had almost captured the princess and the pea. A powerful explosion rang out. The frightened girl covered her ears with her hands. It was Fortilleria who came to the aid of Gregor and Princess in the Polka Dots. However, Murops, although badly injured, was still alive. So the guy had to finish off the monster with a shovel. The young people were finally able to breathe a sigh of relief. Gregor felt sorry that poor Princess in the Polka Dot had to go through this nightmare. But the girl, on the contrary, was happy. Moreover, she managed to see such an incredible battle with her own eyes. A little later, the young people went to Gregor's apartment. The girl was very pleased to meet the little blue monsters in person. Gregor showed Princess Peacock his room. She said it was very cozy. The guy suggested that the girl take a shower after the trip. But as soon as Princess P took a step, a heavy wall fell between her and Gregor. The boy realized that while he was gone, the fort had established its own rules. A sign appeared in front of him, stating that men were not allowed in. This made Gregor terribly confused and angry at the same time. Most of all, he was worried that Princess in the Polka Dot might poop. However, the girl hurried to calm the guy down, stating that everything was fine with her. Not only that, she was simply delighted with the little blue monsters. Sighing, Gregor thought that he probably shouldn't follow the girl everywhere. Suddenly, the boy remembered today's Murop. He wondered why the monster decided to fly to the princess and the pea. Who knows, maybe this girl wasn't as simple as she seemed at first glance. Meanwhile, Dr. Daniel, working in his office, finally managed to confirm his theory. He immediately called Gregor and asked him to come to the hospital tomorrow. The guy tried to refuse because he had a very busy schedule. Smiling, Daniel announced that Gregor had to come. After all, he found important information about him and the Zeroblade. Of course, the next day the guy was in the hospital from the very morning. Dr. Daniel was a little late. When he ran into the office, he immediately handed Gregor a folder without further ado. Opening it, the boy's eyes widened. What he saw in it surprised him terribly. The folder contained a list of people who survived the Zeroblade attack. Daniel added that these were all those whom the monster allowed to live. Gregor was indignant. From the doctor's words, it seemed that Zeroblade felt sorry for him. The boy immediately remembered the most terrible day of his life. It was indeed strange that the monster that had killed his entire family had not touched Gregor himself. Suddenly, a scene flashed before his eyes, which the boy's memory had once blocked. The thing is that Gregor's father covered him with himself, thus saving Gregor's life. The guy shared his memories with Daniel, but the doctor only frowned skeptically. He didn't believe that an ordinary man could stop the Zeroblade. Gregor thought for a moment. He felt that Daniel was right. The doctor said that he thought the boy would be a perfect vessel for the Zeroblade. Hearing this, Gregor was terribly surprised. His heart began to beat several times faster. Daniel stated that he had strong evidence to support his theory. The documents clearly stated that each of the survivors could not connect with the cores of other monsters. Next, the doctor turned on the screen of his tablet. What Gregor saw on him made him turn pale. There was a 94% similarity between the appearance of the surviving man and that of Zeroblade. The guy began to guess what Daniel wanted to convey to him. According to the doctor, Zeroblade deliberately left his possible vessels alive. If any of the vessels possesses the necessary poison, it can itself turn into a monster. Gregor laughed out loud. What he had just heard from Daniel sounded like complete nonsense. The doctor said that the boy could have already observed something similar. Gregor remembered how the kernel, like a sprouted grain, turned the woman into the spider monster. It turns out that some of the survivors may have actually been Zeroblade. However, the boy was interested in how people without any abilities could obtain the monster's core. Daniel replied that they should urgently begin an investigation into this matter. When Gregor left the hospital, he wondered if he too could turn into Zeroblade. But the important thing was that the monster remained his sworn enemy in any case. Gregor planned to use every opportunity to destroy him. Once on the street, the boy heard someone calling him for help. Turning around, Gregor saw young Connie, Spencer's sister. The girl looked extremely excited. The guy didn't understand how she knew about his whereabouts, but Connie didn't have time to explain. She shouted that her brother was in danger. It all started when Spencer decided to hunt down the Anthropes live on air. He introduced his audience to his colleague, the incredible Alec Mona. I also didn't forget about the popular streamer Rosemary Perry. The beautiful Donatella was also to participate in this hunt. The woman was annoyed by the fact that Spencer decided to broadcast at such an important moment. The company noticed that a large number of holes had appeared on the sidewalk. Alec assumed that they were not left by the Anthropes, but by some other creatures. Donatella suggested first putting out the fire and then searching for survivors. Alec, without further ado, activated his core, which was contained in the bracelet. At that moment, water gushed out from him in all directions. It didn't take more than a few minutes for the man to completely deal with the fire. Next, Rosemary Perry took up the matter. The girl directed a magical glow from her palms towards the affected people. She noted that apparently only one man managed to survive. Only from him did Rosemary feel at least some movement. A group of hunters immediately rushed to the victim. They asked the man to tell them what had happened. He started to say something, but the words didn't come out of his mouth. It seemed like he was just moving his lips. Donatella was horrified, she immediately understood what was going on. A moment later, she rose into the sky and quickly flew somewhere. Spencer started to shout something after her, but the words got stuck in his throat. A second later, he was covered in a stream of dust and air. Viewers of the broadcast could not understand what was happening. It later became clear that the hunters had been attacked by a monster. The stream had stopped. Gregor carefully watched the video that Connie showed him. Unfortunately, minimal information could be obtained from this recording. The only thing the guy managed to see was that a lot of smoke appeared during the attack. But it remained a mystery to him why at some point during the broadcast, the sound completely disappeared. Connie told Gregor that her brother was heading towards the airport. The boy wasn't sure if Spencer was still alive, but he promised the girl that he would definitely find the young man. 20 virgin gods were watching Gregor. Soon the boy arrived at the destroyed airport building. There, an all-consuming silence awaited him. Gregor looked around. There were a huge number of holes everywhere. The guy realized that most likely these were the monster's burrows. He decided to try to lure the creature outside. Gregor ordered Okarkal to start the stream immediately. The little monster obeyed. A minute later, the boy was happily greeting the audience. He said that a difficult but very interesting battle awaits him today. Suddenly, Gregor lost his voice. An all-consuming silence fell over him as well. The guy realized that the monster was somewhere nearby. And indeed, soon a terrible creature named Tyshan crawled out of one of the holes. Gregor swung his sharp shovel at her. The blade cut the monster's head in half. But almost immediately, the monster healed and recovered. Gregor realized that he was facing an unusual monster. The creature outgrew all its kind, absorbing the noise of yesterday's rain. A second later, the monster returned to its lair. The boy's voice appeared and he began to hear himself again. The main food of the Tyshans was sound. They especially enjoyed feasting on human screams. So most likely, all the missing people were still alive. Gregor planned to rescue them as soon as possible. Meanwhile, in the lair of silence, Donatella regained consciousness. Looking around, she realized that she was bound by the monster's poison. Being in Tishun's lair was extremely dangerous, as the poison created terrible fumes. Donatella realized that she could not use her power. However, the woman was not going to die here. After all, then her younger sister Mickey, better known as Princess in the Polka Dots, would be left all alone. Donatella realized that she had to get out of Tishun's lair immediately. Suddenly, the light of a flashlight hit her in the face. It was Rosemary who came to her and Spencer's aid. Donatella was surprised that Tishun's poison had no effect on the girl. Rosemary smiled and explained that it had a double core. One of its properties was resistance to monster poison. While Rosemary was talking, Donatella was getting worse. Realizing this, the girl quickly fell silent. But instead of helping, Rosemary started kicking Donatella. The poor woman screamed in unbearable pain. Rosemary burst out laughing. She was terribly amused that Donatella couldn't even dodge her blows. The woman couldn't understand why the streamer allowed herself to treat her so horribly. Smiling evilly, Rosemary confessed that she wanted Donatella dead. It turns out that she was always terribly jealous of the woman. And the girl was also very annoyed by Donatella's attitude towards other hunters. In Rosemary's opinion, she treated everyone very condescendingly. Donatella wanted to object, but the girl didn't let her say a word. She kicked the woman hard in the head. For a moment, Donatella lost all hope of salvation. Suddenly, Gregor burst into Tishun's lair on his shovel. Okarkal flew in after him. The guy immediately rushed to help Spencer. He was in a very bad condition. Rosemary, seeing Gregor, ran to him and hugged him tightly. The girl started to babble something about how grateful she was to the guy for saving her. He thought to himself that Rosemary didn't look injured at all. Most likely, her body was resistant to Tishun's poison. Suddenly, Gregor noticed Donatella's body behind the girl. The boy coldly pushed Rosemary away from him. After that, he approached Donatella, grabbed her by the shoulders, and tried to bring her to consciousness. Gregor told the woman that he couldn't handle Tyshan without her help. Donatella replied that she couldn't concentrate because of the poison. The guy began to beg the woman to pull herself together and not give up under any circumstances. Donatella tried to get to her feet, but she didn't even have the strength to do so. Gregor realized that Tishun was about to appear. The boy shouted to Rosemary to get out of the monster's lair immediately. But the girl had not even taken a step when she found herself in the mouth of Tyshin. Gregor immediately rushed to Rosemary's aid. He swung his sharp shovel, planning to destroy the monster's core with one blow. The guy tried to act carefully so as not to hurt the girl. However, he didn't have time to do anything. A violet magical glow appeared before him. This activated Donatella's core. The woman finally found the strength to fight. Without wasting any time, she quickly attacked Tishun. He roared loudly in pain and let go of Rosemary. The girl was shocked. She couldn't believe that it was Donatella who had saved her. As it turned out, the woman held no grudge against Rosemary. Her only enemy at the moment was Tyshin. Soon Donatella made the monster's poison begin to recede. After the woman saved everyone, she collapsed again. So it was Gregor who should have destroyed Tyshin. Without thinking twice, the boy struck the monster. He succeeded in the main thing, to penetrate the core of Tishun. This meant that the monster was finally finished. Gregor asked Donatella if she could move. The woman did not react to his words. Turning around, the guy saw Rosemary next to Donatella. Two wondered why the woman had saved her, despite their recent conflict. Despite all this, the girl still hated Donatella. Rosemary began to scream that the woman had made her look like a pitiful, worthless being. Donatella directed her power towards the girl, but she instantly froze, unable to move. However, by activating her core, Rosemary was still able to lift the woman's spell. At that moment, Tyshin appeared again. The monster attacked Donatella. The woman began to call for help from Rosemary. However, she never got to see the girl save her. Instead, Gregor came to Donatella's aid. He snatched the woman from Tyshin's jaws in time. The young people lost their voices again. It was starting to annoy them quite a bit. Gregor tried to explain his plan to the woman with gestures. He pointed his hand at Tyshin, who was obviously already preparing for a new attack. He then turned his attention to the affected people, and then on Donatella herself. The woman began to understand what Gregor wanted from her. Without thinking twice, she activated her core and directed the force towards the monster. At that very second, Gregor swung his shovel. He managed to cut Tyshin's core in half. The clearing of the monster's lair was successful. The next day, Donatella woke up in a hospital room, her whole body aching terribly from yesterday's incident. The woman was most interested in what exactly had happened to Rosemary. The girl was not found in Tishun's body, nor in any other place in the lair. It is worth noting that Donatella did not hold a grudge against Rosemary at all. Suddenly, the princess and the pea burst into the woman's room. Donatella was unhappy that her sister came to her because her body was too weak. Princess Polka Dot began to assure the woman that she was completely fine. The thing is, the girl's new friend, a little blue monster, was helping her a lot. Donatella sighed. Whatever the case, she was glad that her younger sister was feeling better. The woman confessed to the princess and the pea that she had exceeded her strength limit 3 times yesterday. And she was also very grateful for Gregor's help. Suddenly, Donatella realized that she needed much more core energy. Princess P smiled sweetly at her sister, saying that she had to run because her friend was already waiting for her. Donatella didn't object. Moreover, she was still too weak to have long conversations. Upon leaving the hospital room, Princess In the Polka Dot immediately pulled out a little blue monster. The next day, Gregor admired the repaired equipment that Fortaleria had presented to him. A little later, the guy started broadcasting. He happily greeted his viewers. Today, he has prepared special content for his fans. A few minutes later, Gregor showed off the brand new rocket that now belonged to him. The guy decided to launch it into the sea right now. He even started the countdown, but the rocket launched on its own. Moreover, instead of the sea, she headed straight for the city. Gregor was terribly scared when he realized that the target of the missile was the hospital. Less than a minute later, a terrible explosion rang out. The boy was in despair. His body was covered with cold drops of sweat. He understood perfectly well that his reputation had obviously come to an end. Gregor decided to read what was being written in the chat under his broadcast. How surprised he was when he saw that the audience considered him a hero. Gregor could not understand what had just happened. 10 minutes before the event, something unusual happened at the hospital. Tybalt and Lindsay entered the building. Without drawing too much attention to themselves, they quickly walked down the hospital corridor. Later, the young people went into Donatella's room. There, too, sat the princess in the polka dots, who had come to visit her older sister. Tybalt and Lindsay invited the woman to join their squad. Donatella was curious why the young people came to her, and not to Gregor. Tybalt was silent. He did not know how to answer the woman's question. The woman admitted that she became a hunter to save human lives. She did not know the real motives of the assault squad, but she felt that they were different from hers. Donatella's words made Tybalt terribly angry. He could not hide his anger, which greatly frightened the sisters. Suddenly, everyone heard strange sounds and vibrations. Donatella's heart beat faster. The clinic was attacked by a whole pack of horrible Murops. No one could understand where these monsters had come from in the city center. Without thinking twice, Donatella leaned out the window. The woman immediately activated her core and began fighting the Moors. However, there were too many monsters. Donatella realized that she was unlikely to be able to hold out for long. Suddenly, a powerful explosion rang out, sending the Murops flying in all directions. It turns out that it was Tybalt who decided to help Donatella. The man hoped that at least in this way the woman would be able to appreciate the full strength and power of the assault squad. Despite the fact that Tybalt's attacks were swift, Donatella understood that even this was not enough to withstand the battle with the Moors. Meanwhile, the monsters have already started making their way to the hospital. Lindsay also had to engage in battle with monsters. Another explosion of incredible force rang out. A minute later, holding a shovel, Gregor appeared near the clinic. He immediately rushed into battle with the monsters. Donatella was terribly surprised. She did not expect to see a guy here. Gregor thought the rocket would put an end to his reputation. Who knew that the Moors would be near the clinic? Smiling, the boy asked Donatella to pass the baton to him. Tybalt was very angry when he saw Gregor. He was not happy to see the boy. What could not be said about the princess and the pea? The girl was overjoyed that Gregor had come to her sister's aid. Other clinic employees and visitors began to beg the boy to be saved. Gregor realized that he had a great opportunity to increase his popularity. Swinging his shovel, he boldly rushed to attack the Murops. Parts of the monsters' bodies began to fly in all directions after meeting with the sharp blade. Tybalt noticed that Gregor had even become stronger than he was before. It seemed as if his movements were guided by some divine force. Less than 10 minutes passed before the boy dealt with all the monsters. Suddenly, heralding failure, Zloakarps howled. Gregor realized that he was still far from a final victory over the monsters. And indeed, soon a new giant swarm of Moorish birds appeared in the sky. The guy decided it was time to fight Fortaleria. Powerful fiery rays flew towards the Murops. And a little later, several strong explosions were heard in a row. Representatives of the assault squad appeared on the territory of the hospital. They were summoned by Tybalt. The young man wanted to prove above all that his fighters were the strongest. But Gregor had already managed to deal with the second pack of Moors on his own. Tybalt could not hide his irritation. It seemed to him that the boy was mocking him. The young man was about to engage in a fight with Gregor, but Lindsay put her hand on his shoulder just in time. She ordered Tybalt not to complicate an already extremely difficult situation. Meanwhile, a satisfied Gregor continued his broadcast. He announced that one of the viewers would receive a Murop antenna from him. Suddenly, the boy saw Princess in the polka dot running out of the hospital to Donatella. Gregor realized that they were sisters. Donatella asked the boy to take care of the princess in the polka dot. He began to refuse. The guy didn't want to take on such a big responsibility. Sighing, the woman confessed that for her, Gregor was the strongest hunter in the world at the moment. These words moved the boy very much. He had no choice but to agree to fulfill Donatella's request. However, he was only going to take care of the princess in the polka dots until her condition improved. Donatella did not object. The girl, realizing that Gregor would take care of her, blushed. Later, Korean television broadcast breaking news reporting the invasion of the Moors on the hospital grounds. Everything could have ended quite sadly if Gregor had not intervened. Despite this, society was dissatisfied with the fact that the Department of Defense had not anticipated the monster attack. The Minister of Defense did not understand how they were supposed to have foreseen this, since the Murops are found in Africa. The man was furious. He realized that his place was now under threat. Meanwhile, Gregor brought Princess in the polka dots to her room. The girl was struck by the beauty of the apartment and the cleanliness that reigned in it. The boy noted that Fortaleria really liked Princess in the polka dot, since she tried so hard for her. However, Princess in the polka dot was uncomfortable being in such conditions while her sister was suffering from pain in the hospital. The girl replied that she had no moral right to stay in this apartment. She began to ask Gregor to give the room to Donatella instead of her. Gregor didn't like this idea very much. He felt that Princess in the polka dot should stay in the fort and her sister in the hospital. Suddenly, the young guys felt something like an earthquake. Immediately, Okarkal shouted, predicting failure. The fortification was surrounded by a giant pack of Moors. Gregor knew that the worst thing he could do now was to panic. So the boy quickly pulled himself together and prepared to fight. Princess Polka Dot realized that Gregor must have known that the Moors would attack the fort. In reality, the boy didn't know for sure, but deep down he expected an invasion of monsters. Unfortunately, the Fortilleria could not deal with the Moors alone. Despite this, Gregor decided that he could try to buy some time. There are few missiles left, and reloading will take some time. Gregor realized that there was only one way out. Quickly activating his shovel, he rushed into the attack. His actions were closely watched by Princess in the Polka Dot and the little blue monsters. The girl realized with horror that it was she who had attracted the Murops. It was because of her that these terrible monsters appeared in Korea. For the sake of the princess and the pea, her sister sacrificed herself. It was painful for the girl to realize that she had put Donatella at risk. She certainly did not want to spend her entire life as a burden to others. Suddenly, Gregor appeared next to Princess Polka Dot. The thing is, fighting with a shovel in the air turned out to be much more difficult than the boy had imagined. The girl told Gregor that she had guessed that all the troubles were because of her. As long as she lives, the Moors will return again and again. The boy replied that Princess in the Pea was right, but they would definitely figure out what to do about it. The girl began to beg Gregor to kill her. The Moors followed their queen's hormones. She was none other than the beautiful princess in the polka dot. In anger, Gregor kicked the girl. He did not want to become the girl's killer. This brought the princess and the pea back to her senses. She clutched her head and cried out in pain. Then she declared that Gregor, like other superhumans, was completely short-sighted. After all, as long as she was alive, all of humanity was under threat. The boy said that now they had to figure out exactly how to use Princess Peach's abilities. Gregor realized that if the girl had attracted the Moors to the Fortilleria, then she would be able to turn them away. Princess P wanted to say something to this, but a pack of monsters roared at her. Without hesitation, Gregor tightly wrapped his arms around the girl's waist. Then the boy began to wave his shovel, destroying the Moors that flew too close to them. Gregor assured Princess P that he would not stop protecting her. These words touched the girl incredibly. For her, the guy was a real hero. She felt an incredible warmth towards Gregor, and her heart beat faster. The gods immediately started laughing at the boy. This made him very angry. He sincerely believed that now was not the time to think about anything else but the fight against the Moors. Princess in the Polka Dots admitted that she is Christopher Nix's daughter. Gregor was very surprised when he heard this. Christopher Nix was a legend of the first generation of hunters, a national hero who saved Korea. The boy felt ashamed that he had hit such a man's daughter on the head. And it turned out that Donatella was also the daughter of Christopher Nix. However, now was not the time to think about it. There were too many Moors circling around the young people. Gregor ordered Princess Polka Dot to return to the middle of the Fortaleria along with the little blue monsters. Then the boy began to think about what to do. The Murops themselves were not a problem, but there were too many of them. Besides, competing with them in the air was much more difficult than on the ground. Sighing, Gregor simply decided to do what he could. He bravely and confidently rushed into battle with the Moors. Princess In the Polka Dot was terribly worried about the boy. She was well aware that there were too many monsters even for a hero like Gregor. The girl was very sad because she personally could not help the boy in any way. She began to pray that someone would come to Gregor's aid. Meanwhile, the guy decided to land, because the fight in the air was completely ineffective. Suddenly, a message appeared before his eyes, saying that Princess P was in danger. This message was from one of the gods. Gregor noticed another pack of Murops approaching the girl. The guy doubted that he would be able to get to her in time. Suddenly, a ring shimmered with a blue glow on his finger. At that very moment, the ring on Princess In the Polka Dot's finger also shimmered with a pink glow. It turns out that Gregor has received a new gift from one of the gods. A second later, some invisible force pulled the boy towards the princess and the pea. The rings on the hands of young people acted like magnets. Thanks to them, Gregor and the surprised girl were together again. Princess P was amazed that the boy was capable of such a feat. The boy felt that his new gift was significantly different from the others. An incredible power emanated from the ring on his finger, and the jewelry resonated with the princess and the polka dot ring. The girl noticed that the rings on their fingers were wedding rings. Gregor understood that the gods really wanted to bring him together with the princess in the polka dot. In general, the boy had nothing against it. With new strength, he again rushed into battle with the Murops. The boy felt as light as a feather. It seemed like he was capable of anything. The last pack of monsters appeared before Gregor. The guy destroyed it in just a few seconds. Princess P was amazed by Gregor's strength and agility. Other residents of the city looked no less surprised. It was hard for everyone to believe that one boy had managed to destroy so many dangerous monsters on his own. It seems that only Donatella was not surprised. She believed in Gregor's incredible abilities. Otherwise, she would never have trusted her younger sister with him. The guy himself decided that it was time to rest a bit. Princess P was sure that new flocks of Murops would arrive soon. Gregor told the girl that these monsters originally lived in Africa. The strongest hunter in the world did not let them leave this continent. Even assuming that the winged species of Murop appeared there, it is impossible to think that no country noticed them on their approach. So the monsters flew in from a neighboring country. So now the young people had to keep track of where the Murops were flying to, and of course, quickly destroy them. Later, news came out reporting that 2 invasions by the Moors had occurred in one day. They were stopped again by none other than the incomparable Gregor. Society was once again dissatisfied with the actions of the state. The Minister of Defense realized that something urgently needed to be done about the boy. After thinking for a moment, he called Gregor. The guy was pleased to be recruited by such a respected person. He immediately asked the Minister of Defense to track the Murops, who were now moving east. Gregor needed to find out where the monster's nest was. The Minister of Defense promised that he would do everything the guy asked him to do. After finishing his conversation with his husband, Gregor turned to Princess in the Polka Dot. He stated that now they must prepare for the next step. The owl was about to storm the Murops' nest. Gregor himself had an idea where it might be. If the monsters flew east, then the nest must have been somewhere near Japan. Suddenly, the guy decided to show Princess in the Pea the most ambitious project of Fortaleria. It turned out to be the newest and coolest fighter jet, which was supposed to deliver young people to Japan in an instant. The girl was delighted. She had never seen anything like it. Meanwhile, The Moorish birds flew to their nest. A mysterious man was already waiting for them there. He didn't like that so few monsters survived. He quickly drew his sword from its sheath. A moment later, all the returning Moors were hacked to pieces by the man's weapon. This was their punishment for not capturing the princess in the polka dots. The man decided to take matters into his own hands. Very soon, Gregor's fighter arrived in Japan. The guy couldn't get enough of the fact that his aircraft was so fast and comfortable. The princess and the pea looked happy too. She wasn't tired at all during the journey. True, the girl was still not sure that she should have flown with Gregor. When she found out about the trip a few hours ago, she was quite scared. However, the boy insisted that Princess P fly with him. He was confident that the girl's strength would help him resist the disgusting Murops. Besides, Gregor wanted to be near the princess and the pea. The girl, of course, could not refuse the guy. Now, sitting in the fighter, she was thinking about how she could help Gregor. Suddenly, the aircraft fell into a snowstorm. A few minutes later, the young people saw a strange structure standing right in the middle of the mountains. It is important to note that there was nothing like it on the maps. Gregor suggested that people might have abandoned this building after the monsters appeared. Looking closer, the boy realized that what they were seeing were not buildings at all. He immediately raised the fighter's altitude, and what was initially taken for buildings began to grow. Gregor was in despair. He scolded himself for his self-confidence. The thing is, the fighter jet landed on 4-star Betonium. This monster could freely manipulate stones and iron and was quite a formidable opponent. Betonius was capable of destroying or building an entire city in an instant. Meanwhile, the monster hit the fighter. Several pieces flew off the aircraft. A mysterious man was watching all of this closely. He was terribly curious about what Gregor would do if Princess in the Polka Dot died. But obviously, the guy wouldn't let the girl die just like that. Not only that, Gregor had already hit Bettany with his shovel. Upon seeing the object, the mysterious man became wary. Not even a minute passed before Gregor dealt with the monster. Only now did he notice a strange figure watching him. Coming a little closer to the boy, the mysterious man asked directly where the princess and the pea had gone. Gregor noticed that the stranger looked like the famous Japanese hunter, Euan Shirin. The boy noticed a strange red energy oozing from the man's body. Now Gregor had no doubt that he was facing Euan Shirin. Unfortunately, not much was known about him. The man rushed to attack the boy, but the boy managed to deflect the blade with his shovel. Gregor realized that one of the gods had sent him a gift again. Euan was not going to give up under any circumstances. Without hesitation, he immediately attacked Gregor again. The thing is, the man also had 23 patron gods. Euan decided to put on an incredible show for them to get a new bonus. He ordered Betonus to wipe Gregor off the face of the earth. The monster hurried to carry out his master's order, but Gregor managed to repel his attack without much effort. The guy was confident in his abilities and future victory. Meanwhile, Princess in the Polka Dots regained consciousness. She was now in a blue capsule created by Fortilleria. The girl remembered how Betonus attacked them. Princess Polka Dot was very worried about what had happened to Gregor. Lifting her head up, she screamed in fright. The fearsome Betonus loomed over the capsule. Gregor and Euan were fighting next to him. Neither of the young men wanted to lose. The blonde Nitch couldn't figure out why his sword strikes weren't working. He was afraid that if he continued like this, the gods would simply turn away from him. He had to deal with Gregor no matter what. He, in turn, also mocked the blonde. The guy believed that Euan was a very weak hunter. The blonde again called for help from Betonus. Gregor realized that Euan could control the monster as a bonus for the performance. At the same time, the guy's physical strength was much stronger. Gregor asked the blonde directly if he was the one who sent the Moors to his country. Smiling evilly, Euan confirmed the boy's guess. He also added that he did this in order to capture the princess and the pea. Gregor realized that the girl was now in great danger. At that very moment, Betonius began to put pressure on the boy. Princess Peacock saw this. She was in despair, but she didn't know how to help Gregor. The boy could not understand what Euan had in mind and why he needed a girl. The blonde didn't want to reveal all his cards to Gregor, especially since he was sure that the boy would die soon. Meanwhile, Betonius destroyed the blue capsule that contained Princess in the Polka Dot. The poor girl thought she wouldn't survive. Suddenly, a red nucleus appeared in front of her. Then something amazing happened. The concrete literally began to crumble before our eyes. This surprised and frightened Euan, who was completely unprepared for this turn of events. Gregor looked no less confused. Within minutes, Betonius was completely destroyed. The guy couldn't contain his joy. After all, he had already said goodbye to life. It was obvious that Princess in the Polka Dot had managed to resonate with the core of Betonius. It turns out that the girl was a superhuman with 2 cores. Without hesitation, Gregor picked up Princess Polka Dot in his arms. Now he was most worried about whether the girl had been injured. Princess P reassured the boy, saying that everything was fine with her. It was no surprise to the girl that she could resonate with the core of Betonius. However, the cores of this monster are considered very rare, so Princess P never thought she would be able to obtain one of them so easily. Euan began to demand that the girl immediately give him the Betonius core. The blonde was ready to fight to the last. He activated his skill Hellflesh. Whole chests of stones flew towards the young people. And a moment later, Euan disappeared far beyond the horizon. Gregor couldn't believe his eyes. He didn't understand what had happened. Princess in the Polka Dots admitted that she simply imagined the blonde flying away from them. A little later, the girl, using her imagination, created a ladder. They and Gregor walked down it. The guy was amazed that the girl could create such incredible structures with the power of thought. Gregor was sorry that Euan had run away. The boy had several important questions for the blonde, and Gregor was convinced that Princess in the Polka Dots was really suitable for the role of Queen of the Moors. Even now, she was producing hormones that were driving monsters crazy. Sooner or later, they won't be able to hold back and will show themselves. When another candidate for the role of Queen appeared, the low-ranking Moors moved. After failing in the battle with Gregor, Euan met a monster girl named Annabelle. She somewhat reassured her husband, stating that they still had a sufficient number of Murops ready for battle. The blonde ordered Annabelle to prepare these monsters for departure as quickly as possible. The monster girl pointed out that they should be more careful. This remark made Euan terribly angry. He directed a stream of his magic at Annabelle, thereby causing her severe pain. The man was convinced that the monster girl had no right to lecture him. Above all, Euan now sought to regain the favor of the gods, who were evidently displeased with him after the last battle. The man ordered Annabelle to shut up and do whatever he commanded. After the man once pierced the monster girl with a sword, she became his forever. Annabelle's main job was to lay eggs. It was from them that the disgusting Murops emerged. The monster girl sighed and promised that she would do whatever Euan wanted. Annabelle was already starting to annoy her husband quite a bit. He noticed that the monster girl had slowed down her reproduction rate, so she needed to be replaced as soon as possible. In Euan's opinion, the princess in the polka dot would be a great fit for Annabelle. And at that very moment she felt something approaching her and Gregor. The boy prepared for a new attack by the Moors, and indeed, not even a minute passed before the young people were attacked by a whole pack of monsters. Gregor was not at a loss. He knew that his shovel could cut open the bodies of all these monsters. However, these Murops turned out to be not as simple as the previous ones. They released poisonous acid from their mouths. Gregor hugged Princess P tightly. He didn't want the girl to get hurt. The guy decided to fight to the last. Swinging his shovel, he ran to attack the Murops. They were not afraid and surrounded Gregor from all sides. Princess P was terribly scared. She didn't know how to help the boy. Gregor was hitting the monsters with his shovel. He tried to figure out what Euan Sheeran's true plan was. Suddenly, heralding failure, Zloakarps let out a loud cry. Gregor immediately looked back in the direction where Princess and the polka dot was supposed to be. Unfortunately, the girl was not there at the time. The boy realized that Euan had stolen it while he was fighting the Moors. The blonde couldn't be happy with his prey. He lured the poor girl to the Moor's nest. Euan knew that if he didn't find this place and kill the queen, the monsters would continue to multiply. The Murops nest is an endless, expanding system of tunnels. In other words, an endless labyrinth. Many hunters tried to raid this nest, but the monsters ate them before they reached the queen. The tunnels were to continue to grow until the city fell. The only one who could control all this was Euan Shirin. The blonde decided to take from the princess and the pea what he believed was rightfully his. A moment later, the Batonus core was in Euan's hands. The man promised the girl that he would give her new strength. At that very second, some disgusting tentacles began to wrap around Princess in the Polka Dot's body. The poor girl realized that Euan was planning to make her the new queen of the Moors. Annabelle slowly raised her hand to Princess in the Polka Dot's throat. The girl screamed that she did not want to become the queen of monsters. She saw an indescribable sadness in Annabelle's eyes. In a moment, everything disappeared. The princess and the pea seemed to have fallen into a void. What she later saw in front of her made her body shudder. A giant, disgusting Murop was heading towards her. The monster's eyes burned with hellish fire. Princess Pea screamed, thinking that she was finished. Suddenly, Euan, who had appeared out of nowhere, covered her. A second later, Annabelle appeared. Only she looked like a human, not a monster. The princess and the pea got the impression that the young people didn't notice her. At least they didn't react to her in any way. The girl realized that she was seeing Annabelle's memories from the time when she was not yet the queen of the Moors. Now, she was trying to instill in the girl everything she had in order to make her the new queen as quickly as possible. Annabelle believed that Princess in the Polka Dot would be stronger than her. The girl saw how Euan took advantage of Annabelle, turning her into a monster. And then he plunged the sword into her chest, thereby binding her to him forever. Annabelle never expected such a despicable act from Euan, whom she loved with all her heart. It turns out that the blonde dreamed of only one thing: to take over the world. Princess P felt terribly sorry for the monster girl. Euan Shirin did everything to attract the attention of the gods. He sincerely believed that no one could stop him. Meanwhile, Princess in the Pea began to break free from her bonds. This only made Euan laugh. He began to assure the girl that Gregor would never find and save her. The blonde believed that Princess in the Pea would give him many children, thanks to which he would be able to conquer the world. Euan began to imagine people from all continents bowing at his feet. Suddenly, a shower of stones fell on him from above. The blonde was seriously scared. He couldn't understand what was happening. A moment later, he saw Gregor, who had somehow managed to reach the nest. The boy immediately rushed to the princess and the pea. He shouted at Annabelle to casually remove her hands from the girl. Euan wondered how Gregor had managed to find them in this endless maze. The guy burst out laughing, saying that the blonde obviously wasn't watching his stream. Meanwhile, Princess in the Polka Dot has thrown off her synchronization with Annabelle. Euan ordered the monster girl to set all the Moors against Gregor. Of course, she obeyed. A whole pack of monsters moved towards the boy, but the boy wasn't scared. He had already competed with the Moors many times. The boy began to boldly swing his shovel from side to side, destroying one monster after another. This made Euan terribly angry. He realized that Gregor could not be killed just like that. The next moment, the boy charged the blonde in the face with his shovel. Euan was thrown back several meters. Gregor smiled triumphantly. He knew he was many times better than this insolent scumbag. The government center of Tokyo was restless. The prime minister was notified of an extremely complex emergency situation. There were attacks by the terrible Moors all over the country. Meanwhile, Euan Shirin tried to pull himself together to confront Gregor, but he couldn't. The guy was convinced that the blonde was finished. Euan tried to get the Murops on Gregor again, but the guy dealt with them very quickly. After that, he released Princess in the Polka Dot from Annabelle's arms. Gregor gently picked the girl up in his arms and tried to calm her down. Annabelle ordered the Moors to attack the young men. However, the boy quickly dealt with them again with his shovel. As soon as he did this, Annabelle disappeared. This greatly alarmed Gregor and the princess and the pea. Euan Sheeran also escaped. It all looked pretty suspicious. Suddenly, the girl apologized to Gregor. She was sorry that he had spent so much time and effort saving her. The boy reassured Princess and the pea, saying that it was only thanks to her that they were able to find and destroy the Murops' nest. Moreover, Gregor sincerely believed that the girl had saved the world. Princess P was overcome with emotion and burst into tears. The guy tried his best to calm the girl down. A day has passed since the terrible attack of the disgusting Moors. The people in power were desperate because they couldn't hide everything. They understood that they had to come up with some kind of plan. That's why the Prime Minister and his assistant went down to a secret underground bunker. Waiting for them, there was none other than Euan Sheeran himself. The Prime Minister asked the blonde why he hadn't kept his promises. After all, he had guaranteed that he would be able to stop the attacks of all the monsters in exchange for financial support from the state. Euan angrily told the men to be glad they were alive. Moreover, now it was time to pay the debt. The Prime Minister and his assistant didn't understand what debt the blonde was talking about. After all, they had fulfilled all their obligations. Euan replied that the men should pay him not with money, but with their lives. Blondin ordered politicians to mobilize everyone: soldiers, scientists, doctors. The men had no choice but to promise Euan to carry out his order. Meanwhile, Gregor couldn't believe that the blonde had placed the Murop nest right outside Tokyo. Now the young men had to find a base. The guy assumed they would have to negotiate with the Tokyo government. A few minutes later, a fighter jet buzzed overhead, above Gregor and Princess the Polka Dot. The young people were very happy that the Fortillery had repaired their aircraft. Without wasting time, they set off for Tokyo. Annabelle immediately sensed their approach. She immediately informed Euan about this. He was very happy about the news. After thinking for a while, the blonde wrote a message to the Prime Minister. In it, he ordered that everything flying over Tokyo be considered enemy aircraft. All this should have been ruthlessly destroyed. Dozens of missiles flew towards Gregor and Princess P's helicopter. However, none of them survived the aircraft. Euan was informed that the military had still managed to shoot down some unknown object near Tokyo. However, the blonde's thoughts were now occupied with something completely different. The thing is, the gods were very unhappy with Euan's actions. They seemed extremely uninteresting to them. The man decided to put on a grand show to regain the favor of the gods. With one movement, Euan slit the Prime Minister's throat. However, this did not encourage the gods at all. On the contrary, they noted that the blonde was behaving like a weakling. Euan appointed a former aide as the new Prime Minister. The man wanted to see Gregor's corpse in front of him. Eventually, a small crowd of Tokyo hunters formed around the boy's fighter. They were going to finish off the guy because they were sure that it was he who brought the Murops to Japan. When Gregor heard this, he was both surprised and angry. The hunters immediately began aiming fire jets at the boy. Suddenly, a powerful explosion of incredible force was heard. A moment later, Gregor was above the heads of the stunned hunters. Swinging his shovel, he hit each of them in the face. An hour ago, all these hunters had been begging Euan to let them destroy the boy. Not knowing the truth, they wanted revenge on Gregor for bringing the terrible Moors to the lands of Japan. The blonde didn't object. Everything was going according to his plan. He had framed Gregor and was now happy that everyone thought that it was the boy who was to blame for the monster attacks. Euan intended to use the anger of the masses to defeat his enemy. And he also sincerely hoped to attract the favor of the gods to his person. The blonde man personally met with the most powerful hunters in Japan. He noted that it was Gregor who was the cause of their country's failures. So now everyone's main goal must be to destroy this guy. The hunters unanimously supported Euan Sheeran's words. Killing Gregor became a matter of honor for them. The new Prime Minister was amazed at how easily the blonde lied to the crowd. Deep down, he hoped that Gregor would destroy this scumbag. Very soon a guy appeared on the square. He told Euan that he dare not lie to him. However, Gregor didn't have time to finish. Something buzzed loudly behind him. Turning around, the boy saw the Murops. Frankly, he was already tired of fighting these monsters. The hunters thought that Gregor had brought the Moors with him. It turns out that Euan was right. These conclusions of the crowd greatly confused the kid. He had no idea that the blonde had brainwashed people like that. After thinking a little, Gregor decided to play by Euan's rules a little. He held out a shovel in front of him, thereby blocking all of the hunters' attacks. A moment later, the boy, in one fell swoop, scattered the people around him. Gregor's main target was the scumbag Euan. He, in turn, once again thought that the guy was a very strong opponent. However, everything was going according to plan. The blonde hoped that Gregor would now be saddled with the yoke of a murderer. But the unexpected happened. People began to rise from the ground. Although their cores were broken, they themselves remained alive. Euan was furious. His plan was starting to fall apart. He was also terribly surprised how, in such chaos, Gregor managed to concentrate on the nuclear attack. Meanwhile, the boy again struck at the hunters who tried to attack him. The Prime Minister was secretly pleased that it was Gregor who was winning. Suddenly, Annabelle appeared on the battlefield. The monster girl was the last trump card in Euan's sleeve. The blonde ordered her to start killing the hunters. At that very moment, a whole pack of angry Murops came running. Gregor shouted to Euan that in this way he would kill all his comrades. The blonde replied that it wasn't him who was killing them, but the boy. Meanwhile, the hunters began to beg for help. The thing is, they couldn't compete with the monsters without their cores. With one swing of his shovel, Gregor managed to destroy a dozen Moors. Other monsters followed. The boy relentlessly destroyed monster after monster. In an instant, the Murops surrounded the three hunters. Their chances of survival were extremely slim. But Gregor came to the rescue of the men. The boy quickly dealt with the monsters, which greatly surprised the hunters. And the situation on the battlefield was getting worse. The guy was starting to get tired. Besides, there were just too many Murops. Eventually, the boy crossed arms with Euan. In this fight, the blonde felt more confident than the boy. In addition, he had a lot of support from the crowd. People didn't understand that Euan was using them unscrupulously. Today, he planned to destroy Gregor and rise to new heights. Next, the blonde was going to find the princess and the pea. He understood that Gregor had obviously hidden it somewhere safe. However, even then, finding her for Euan will be just a matter of time. Suddenly, Princess in the Polka Dot appeared on the battlefield. Everyone immediately stopped fighting and stared at the girl. She announced that she was going to show exclusive videos of the unrivaled Gregor on the screen. Euan shouted to the hunters to capture the girl immediately. At the same time, footage appeared on the screen, making it clear to everyone that it was the blonde who sent the Murops to Korea. The hunters also learned that Euan ruled Batonis. This only said one thing. The real enemy of Japan was not Gregor, but the blonde. Euan tried to assure the crowd that all the videos that Princess in the Polka Dot had shown were fake. Smiling, Gregor informed the blonde that even now there was a broadcast on his channel. Euan was horrified to see Okarkal with a camera above his head. The man realized that his end had come. It was unlikely that he would ever be able to whiten his reputation. Afterwards, the Prime Minister thanked Gregor and Princess in the Polka Dot for their help. If it weren't for the young people, the people of his country would never have known that Euan was a criminal. The man was terribly sorry and ashamed that he himself had once trusted this scumbag. The Prime Minister did not absolve himself of responsibility for the deaths of so many people. However, he was glad that some of the casualties had been avoided. Bowing before the princess and the pea, the man began to beg her to save Japan. The girl reassured the Prime Minister, saying that there was no one stronger than Gregor. And indeed, the boy was now winning the fight with Euan. Gregor hit the blonde with his fists as hard as he could. For such a scumbag as Euan was, he even felt sorry for using a shovel. Gregor planned to destroy the blonde with his bare hands. But Euan didn't give up. He didn't want to lose to the guy. Although with his last strength, the man was ready to continue the fight. He called all the surviving Murops to him. Euan planned to use all the power he had against Gregor. Gathering his thoughts, the blonde prepared for his final blow, which absorbed the power of the gods and the power of the core. But the boy repelled this attack with literally one hand. Euan finally understood that the gods had turned their backs on him. Gregor pushed the blonde away dozens of meters from him. He fell right under the feet of the astonished hunters. The men surrounded Euan from all sides. They all wanted to take revenge on the blonde for having deceived them so meanly. Euan began to beg the gods to give him at least one more chance. But they were adamant. On a physical level, the blonde felt his strength begin to leave him. A moment later, blows from the angry hunters rained down on Euan. Gregor watched all this carefully. He understood better than anyone men who had lost everything and now wanted only one thing: revenge. Suddenly, some unknown force pushed the hunters away from Euan. Everyone saw Annabelle with a sword in her chest. Euan began shouting something about how he was still the Lord of the Moors. He ordered the monster girl to kill all the inhabitants of Japan. Hearing this, the hunters stopped dead in their tracks. The poor prime minister's heart went cold. Even the princess and the pea looked scared. Annabelle prepared to carry out her master's order. Without wasting time, Gregor rushed towards the monster girl. With one swing of the shovel, he chopped her body apart. Annabelle disappeared forever, literally melting into thin air. In despair, Euan fell to his knees. It took him a while to realize that the Moorish queen was no more. Enraged, the blonde shouted to the monsters to attack Gregor. However, the Moors did not obey Euan because he no longer had power over them. Moreover, the monsters began to approach the blonde himself. After a few more seconds, the Murops began to devour Euan. Gregor had to push the monster away from the blonde. The blonde was already barely breathing. Euan started babbling something about how, no matter what, he was the chosen one. The blonde believed that he would not die because the power of the gods was behind him. However, the man was surprised that the bleeding from his wounds would not stop. A few minutes later, life left Euan's body. Gregor sighed heavily. Strangely, he felt no joy at the death of his enemy. For defeating the blonde, the guy received a new bonus from the gods. Magic pyramids with numbers appeared above him again. After a few minutes, Gregor unlocked a bonus called Ether. Something amazing began to happen to the boy's eyesight. He began to see the elements, the structure, the threads of everything that exists. All the streams flowed into his mind. Gregor saw the matter and cores of the Moors. After thinking a little, the guy decided to cut off this connection. A second later, the entire army of monsters disappeared with a single wave of Gregor's hand. Princess P screamed with joy and even clapped her hands. What Gregor managed to do was a true miracle. It is also worth noting that Okercool filmed all of this. The next day, the news was full of talk about the guy. What's more, he saved Japan live on air by destroying the Moorish queen. Gregor received a new wave of popularity, this time international. The boy was now taking a hot bath, resting from the drinking of the previous days. He was glad that he had managed to gain a new power, ether. It allowed Gregor to manipulate the properties of matter. Not only that, he could even change its composition. For example, the boy was now able to turn water into amazing crystals. However, as with chakra, Gregor could only use a portion of his new power. The guy decided to rest a bit and watch from the sidelines to see how the situation would unfold. Suddenly, he received a video notification. Gregor was surprised because it came to a number that no one knew. The silhouette of a woman appeared on the screen. The stranger introduced herself as Danija from Serbia. She stated that she needed Gregor's help. The thing is, the Zeroblade has appeared in her country. Serbia is ready to provide the boy with everything he needs to fight this monster. Finally, Danai added that she would wait for Gregor's answer. The boy ordered the little blue monster to immediately contact the Fortilleria and prepare a fighter. Gregor was ready to fly to Serbia. An hour later, the boy and princess in the polka dots were standing near the fighter. The girl was very worried about Gregor. She understood perfectly well that Zeroblade was a difficult opponent. The guy assured the girl that she shouldn't worry about him. After that, he said a warm goodbye to her and boarded the fighter jet. Soon the aircraft was already in Serbian airspace. Gregor pondered his next steps. He was convinced that this time he would definitely be able to defeat the Zeroblade. Suddenly, the guy's fighter jet started attacking with a laser. Gregor was surprised. He was not at all prepared for this. He ordered the fighter to track where the laser was being fired from. It turns out that the guy was attacked by a vulture. It was a 5-star monster of incredible strength. He was currently fighting other monsters. Apparently, the laser had somehow reached Gregor's fighter. All of this was closely watched by a man named Milos and a woman named Zarita. The woman reported that the attack on Grifu could be completed, as Gregor had already arrived at the scene. It was planned that the boy would become a key figure in their family. Meanwhile, Gregor ordered the fighter to send him straight to Griffin. Before meeting Zeroblade, the boy wanted to practice with his new power. He felt the need to familiarize himself with the ether. Without wasting time, Gregor attacked Griffin. The guy literally forced the monster to turn off the laser. Milos and Zarita were watching Gregor's actions. So far, the boy had not disappointed them. Before their eyes, he managed to kill Griff with one well-aimed blow. The man and woman could only wonder where Gregor got such extraordinary strength. Zarita realized that the guy obviously had at least 2 bonuses from the gods. Gregor, meanwhile, reflected on the fact that although his new power was very powerful, there was a certain risk in using it. In a battle with Zeroblade, you should use ether with extreme caution. Later, Zarita came out to the boy. Gregor immediately recognized her as the woman from the video message, who introduced herself by the false name of Dane. The boy was alarmed by the woman's sudden appearance. He didn't like the fact that she was following him. Zarita promised to explain everything to Gregor on the way. She suggested that the boy head to Zeroblade right away. A minute later, a truck appeared in front of them. Without hesitation, Gregor and Zarita set off on their journey. The guy noticed that such a powerful truck could withstand many monster attacks. The woman sighed heavily. Serbia, and especially its central part, has always been a very dangerous place. Less than an hour passed before the truck arrived at the scene. Gregor and Zarita found themselves in a seemingly ordinary residential area. However, the boy had a nagging feeling that something was wrong. Some invisible, serious force was swirling around him. Gregor asked Zarita if Zeroblade was really here. The woman did not directly answer the guy's question, stating that he would have to make a choice. Gregor didn't like this. He began to suspect that he had fallen into a trap. He even took out his shovel just in case. After that, the boy confidently moved forward. At one point, Gregor was overcome by a strange feeling. It was as if he had entered a tent. Nothing like this had ever happened to the boy before, so he didn't know how to behave properly. Suddenly, a Zeroblade flashed by Gregor. The guy was not confused and immediately hit the monster with a shovel. He repelled Gregor's attack with lightning speed. The boy had the impression that Zeroblade was inanimate. Moreover, this monster was not at all the same as the one Gregor had encountered before. Despite this, he attacked again. This attempt was also unsuccessful. This monster was also a Zeroblade, so the boy wanted to destroy it. Suddenly, new blades began to grow from the monster. This confused Gregor. It was the first time he had seen anything like this. After thinking for a while, the guy decided to try something. Holding his shovel at the ready, he resolutely rushed towards the Zeroblade. Exhaling, Gregor activated the first bonus from the God's Chakra. After that, he resolutely rushed towards the monster. Zarita watched all this carefully. She found confirmation of her suspicions in the boy's actions. Meanwhile, Gregor became convinced that the monster in front of him was not the real Zeroblade. The thing is, the blades of this monster were completely soft. Just as the boy was thinking about this, the monster in front of him collapsed to the ground. Zarita calmly announced that Gregor had passed the test. She understood that she and the boy had a chance to put an end to the tragedy. Gregor found no core inside the monster's body, indicating that the Zeroblade was indeed fake. The guy was angry because Zarita had deceived him. He began to demand immediate explanations from the woman. Sighing, the woman said that she had not deceived the boy. These words irritated Gregor even more. After all, he had spent a lot of energy fighting the fake Zeroblade. Zarita said that she would not refuse to take the boy to a real monster. Suddenly, an avalanche appeared in front of the young people. Zarita grabbed Gregor's hand tightly and then pulled him straight into the snowdrift. A moment later, they found themselves on some rock. The guy realized that the woman had mastered the art of teleportation. Zarita reported that a monster reigns in eastern Serbia, which may be the key to finding the Zeroblade. The boy realized that he was obviously talking about a monster named the Snowman. The woman admitted that she, like Gregor, is a player chosen by the gods. Hearing this, the boy was very surprised, but now a lot became clear to him. Zarita wasn't going to lie and deceive him. In a calm tone, she told Gregor an amazing story. It turns out that 10 years ago, Serbia was at war with monsters. People were in despair. It seemed that this hostility would never end. That's when the Snowman appeared with his army. Residents of Serbia learned what an avalanche of monsters is. Zarina, who was still a teenager at the time, tried to stay close to her parents. However, the monsters first killed her father Marik, and then Katarzina's mother. Then, in despair, Zarita began to beg the gods for help. And a miracle happened. They heard her. The girl found herself on a high cliff where there were no monsters at all. There, Zarita received a message that she had her first god spectator. He gave her a beautiful green core. The girl was very surprised by such a generous gift. Later, monsters began to attack her, and God suggested that she try to survive. The core gave her the ability to teleport. Zarita immediately rushed to her parents. She had a glimmer of hope that they might still survive. However, the snowman captured the girl. He hid the girl in an ice crystal. Laughing, the monster offered poor Zareka a choice. He could bury the girl with her parents, or give her the opportunity to become like him. The girl never wanted to become like the snowman, because he killed the people most dear to her. The monster remarked that if Zarika did become like him, he would save the souls of her parents and protect Serbia. The girl had to make a difficult choice. She thought about it. Something about the snowman's words really worried her. She also sensed that the monster had a different source of power than hers. A blade protruded from its chest. Zarita saw the snowman's energy flowing out of his body. There was no doubt this monster needed her help. Sighing heavily, she agreed to become like him. However, the girl promised herself that one day she would definitely destroy the snowman. Now the girl had the same hatred as Gregor. That's why she promised she would never cheat on the guy. Gregor was curious about what exactly this mysterious snowman was pursuing. The woman replied that the blade in the monster's body belonged to the Zeroblade. Hearing this, the boy was quite surprised, but the puzzle in his head gradually began to come together. Zarika added that Serbia is teeming with high-ranking monsters. Here once competed Snowman and Zeroblade. The first managed to close the second in space-time, but Zeroblade made a difficult deal with the Snowman. If the Snowman helps satisfy Zeroblade's thirst for blood, his life will be extended. The Snowman agreed. He used Zarita to attract high-ranking monsters to his territory. The Snowman is engaged in transforming monsters into his own kind. One day he will definitely try to break the seal and kill Zeroblade. Gregor realized that Zarita had been a tool of the Snowman all along. The woman replied that if she had only done this, the other hunters would have destroyed her long ago. Zarita's words seemed incomprehensible to the boy. She explained that they gain something from these fights with monsters. She gives the corpses of the monsters to Milos. His army uses the bodies of the monsters. So now his strength is equal to the Snowman. At this point, the hunters could at least somehow protect Serbia on their own. Gregor noticed that the woman spoke with quite confidence. However, what interested him most right now was how exactly Zarita planned to deal with Zeroblade. The woman replied that this was why they contacted Gregor. It turns out that the guy had been followed for a very long time. They decided to contact each other when Gregor figured out the situation with the Murops in Japan. Zarita added that as long as the Zeroblade was locked in the snowman's subspace, no one would be able to reach it. Once it broke free, the woman promised to arrange a duel between Gregor and the monster. In Zarita's opinion, it was a completely fair deal. After thinking it over carefully, Gregor agreed. The woman was overjoyed to hear the boy's answer. She wanted to say something but didn't have time. Several hideous monsters appeared before the young people. Without hesitation, Gregor bravely rushed at them with a shovel. At that moment, 26 gods were watching him closely. The boy did not want to disappoint them in any way. He quickly activated his first bonus, Chakra. However, these monsters regenerated in literally seconds. Gregor realized that this was most likely because there was snow all around. Unfortunately, these monsters couldn't simply be chopped to pieces with a shovel. After thinking a little, the guy decided to try to take advantage of the earthquake. He quickly stuck his shovel into the ground. It didn't cause an earthquake, but hot lava suddenly poured out all around. The monsters began to choke and drown in it. Gregor realized that he had managed to destroy one of the snowman's main henchmen. Zarita was amazed by the boy's abilities. The guy suddenly declared that he still didn't trust the woman completely. These words upset Zarita because she had been completely honest with Gregor. The guy wanted the woman to share her plan with him. Later, the young people found themselves back in the truck.